Hello, good evening. What's up? This is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist. The only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole, joined by Jay, coming at you a bit late tonight, but we wanted to make it, so here we are. With our second installment of our mini series, or whatever you want to call it, on filmmaker extraordinaire Orson Welles. So, what was our first one? Our first one was the film noir Touch of Evil, which was one that Welles directed and starred in. And as we've talked about Welles, what makes him such an extraordinary filmmaker and just figure in film is, that he wore so many hats. He was a director, he was a producer, he was a writer, he was an actor, and sometimes he did all those things in the same movie. So, but the one we're going with tonight is a bit of an oddity, I suppose, as far as that goes, because this is one that he did not direct or produce. This is strictly an acting performance, which I don't think normally would be what you would focus on, but it's just a movie that I like so much, and I think it is such a striking performance, especially given that this is a movie that his character doesn't even appear in until the final act. He's not in the movie for 2/3 of it, so it's not like he's carrying the whole movie. But I've always just thought of it as such an iconic character and performance, and that is as the character Harry Lime in this, of course, is 1949's The Third Man. So I'm trying to remember stuff we talked about in the other episode, because, like I said, I didn't want to overload it with too much information on Welles, but I did give some of the background about his career. So at this point in his career, Welles is kind of being seen almost as a disappointment, honestly, in that he started off so high with although it wasn't a huge success, it was still considered a really great achievement at the time. We talked about this for, God, I'm stumbling all over my words tonight. Hopefully I'll pick this up as we go on. But Citizen Kane, as we said, Citizen Kane, of course, has its amazing reputation. It's had it a long time as, one of the greatest films of all time. So, on many lists, it is listed as the absolute greatest film of all time. It's number one. But the truth is, even though people were impressed by the film in its day, particularly because of Welles' role in it. This is the one where he did write, direct, produce, and star, and and all at the age of 25, which is crazy. The fact is, the movie it didn't get its reputation as like a masterpiece until almost about 15 years later. It wasn't until towards maybe the end of the 50s, start of the 60s, that it was starting to be reevaluated, when people were really starting to come around to it. Critics, especially, I guess, probably in some of the higher places in the film world, like the highly respected and influential French magazine dedicated to film, Cahiers de Cinema. I think there were some of the writers for that were writing articles and talking about what a great film it was and how it needed more attention and stuff. So anyway, what had happened? So this was all before that. This is the 40s, and Welles' follow-up, The Magnificent Ambersons, was applauded as a fairly good movie, but nothing special, and certainly couldn't capture the magic of the first one. And then he had a few more attempts, and he did Lady from Shanghai, and as well as The Stranger. And while The Stranger was the last financially successful film he did, again, it wasn't anything that I think anybody thought was particularly interesting or special. So I think by the end of the decade, he'd already gotten a bit of a reputation as somebody that had shot his wad too early or something. Like, he already peaked, maybe he's coming down now. And this is just around the time that he's become completely fed up with Hollywood and its practices and the way films are run with the studio system and the constant editing and the cutting and stuff. And so he's bolted to Europe. So it's during his first sojourn in Europe. Well, first as a filmmaker, I mean, he actually spent a lot of the 30s in Europe too, as we talked about, I think, before coming back to New York, I believe, to the theater scene and later radio before making his way to Hollywood. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. So this is during that period, and this is a British film, and the director is a Brit, of course, too, Carol Reed. And I guess for a long time, as there's a lot of these myths in cinema, there was a bit of a myth that maybe this is one of those ones that, like, even though he was not the director, because he was Orson Welles, some people thought maybe he just sort of ghost directed it. That's mostly been disputed and said no, he really was just an actor in this movie, and it really was Reed's film. But at the same time, you can see that even I don't know how often this comes up in other people's careers, but it's interesting to note that this film while it has Orson Welles simply as an actor in it, you can see that the movie itself is highly influenced by his earlier directorial efforts, particularly something like Lady from Shanghai and The Stranger, with their really noir style, and even some of the stuff that was in the initial Citizen Kane, some of the camera work and things like that. And I think it's pretty apparent that yeah, this movie borrows kind of heavily from that stylistically and even in some other technical ways. So that's kind of interesting. I can't really come up with another comparison for that, although I'm sure something like that exists. But it's kind of a unique position. So anyway, so this is the point of Welles' career where he's become a little bit disillusioned. He hasn't given up on making films. In fact, he's more determined than ever to make films. But now he's over in Europe trying to do it that way. But part of the deal with trying to get films made over in Europe is that he needs to raise funds, and this goes to him going again to different independent people to be producers, but also he's just trying to raise funds on his own. So this role was very much financially motivated in that he basically took the role because he needed the money, and yet it's gone down as a very acclaimed and iconic role. And I think it's the first movie I ever saw him act in. You know, at least I think, you know, saw him on the screen, because yes, as a kid I did see his last performance, his voiceover performance as Unicron in the Transformers movie that we joked about at the end, which is an interesting coda to such a crazy career. But yeah, I think this might be the first movie I saw, like, yeah, saw him on the screen, because I know I saw it before I saw Citizen Kane, I saw it before I saw Touch of Evil, or The Stranger. Yeah, so as far as I can remember, this is the first time I saw him on the screen. And I think I was a little confused going to the movie, because I think the first time I saw the movie, which is about 11 or 12 years ago when I had rented it, I thought it was one he had directed, but just, yeah, it's not. It's Carol Reed. So this film is set in and also shot on location in post-war Vienna, and has a sort of nice sort of early Cold War backdrop. Now, the plot itself is not politically driven. It's not really about spies or anything political, but that's all there in the background, and it's a really a nice setting for a little piece of noir. And the film opens with some narration, actually, really right off the bat, setting us up and letting people know kind of what the scene is like here in Vienna. And the most important bit of information, of course, is that Vienna, like a lot of cities in Europe, continental Europe, had been, you know, absolutely rocked by World War II. And here we are 4 or 5 years after the fact, and things are still kind of a mess, and parts of the city are still rubble. So also because of Austria's involvement in the war with Germany, at this point, Vienna is occupied by the Allied forces. And in its case, it's split into 4 different zones, each controlled by a different Allied power. So there's the American, the Russian, the French, and the British. And this primarily takes place in the British sector. Right. So yeah, nice little backdrop for some noir. I think it's definitely a movie that no, I wouldn't say subverts, but plays with your expectations. Especially people said it was a noir, because it's not really. It is sort of a crime thriller, but not the typical one you might think of. It's much less. It's much more off the board than actually the last one we just did, which was Touch of Evil, and even Touch of Evil had its traits that made it different because of where it's set and what it was. But it still was sort of a crime-driven plot with law enforcement. This one is too. It's a crime-driven plot with law enforcement involvement, but the ride it takes you on, because of the character it centers on, makes it quite different, I think, from sort of your typical crime story. That's another thing that makes it memorable. So you hadn't seen this one before, had you?
First time watch. What was the
yeah, sure.
What was the last was it Touch of Evil? Was the last film that's considered noir and not a neo-noir?
Yeah, like a true noir.
Okay.
Yeah, say Touch of Evil, which was 58.
Okay. So this film will be considered noir.
Yeah, and right in the heyday of noir, really. Yeah, the later 40s was really the heyday. So yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was much more, subdued, and the Touch of Evil. I was really impressed with, the cinematography. This one was pretty much just, nothing really that spectacular going on in that, cinematography wise.
I really love the cinematography in the ending, the
Yeah,
sewer
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. I guess you're right. Yeah, but
I mean, I mean that's true. I guess not as a whole, you would say. I mean, the cinematography is more standard, and it's more made up
mhm,
by just having like an interesting environment.
mhm,
But I would say that even if it's only about 15 minutes of screen time, actually the whole sewer stuff is some of my favorite cinematography ever. Really,
mhm.
I love it that much. But yeah, and you just sort of general impressions first before we get into more specific elements.
Um, yeah, I mean, I wasn't extremely impressed or anything, but I thought it was okay. Um, Obviously, I like Touch of Evil quite a bit better.
Oh yeah, okay. Now, for me, I like this one more. Um, and maybe it does take multiple viewings sometimes.
Mhm,
Although, again, I hadn't actually seen it in a lot of years, and there were a lot of things I'd forgotten. But it's always just sort of struck me um, how effective some things are, but
mhm,
in just a really subtle way. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like Harry Lime so much as a villain, because you don't see him doing that much.
mhm,
It's just the implications of what he has done and also his attitude towards it. And I think that's what really separates him from a lot of other memorable on-screen villains, because most of them, well, we see their villainy, we see them doing the really evil things in this. And this, we don't see him doing that much. It's mostly just, again, people talking about it and him talking about his own attitude towards it, which makes it a much different approach, I guess, for a villain and a much more subtle. And I don't know, I just really appreciate it in this movie. It's something that maybe doesn't even strike you while you're watching it. It's more you kind of have to think about it
mhm.
afterwards. And I just love how, and it just, again, it's testament to Wells's talent that he just seemed to understand that so well. He seemed to have a better sense of it than maybe even the people that wrote it. I don't know. He just seemed to have such a great feel for this character and what to do. And of course, uh, yeah, we'll touch on that. I was going to say, so this movie's known for a few things. Certainly, these were some things I knew about the movie years before I saw it. So it's the type of thing, these are some of the type of things that that even people who haven't seen the movie sometimes hear about, a part of a reputation. One is the soundtrack, which is pretty interesting and different. It's all played on the instrument known as the zither, by one artist named Anton Kuras. So the movie's always associated with that because I'm pretty sure there's no other music at all in it. And it's interesting because it in one way it fits. It's Vienna, but the other it's so not noir. And a lot of it is very upbeat, and the movie starts with a very sort of pleasant, sort of upbeat sound, and it ends with it too, which is, I guess, them just sort of using the music ironically, which I think works pretty well. So that's one of the things that's always said about the movie. You hear about it's sort of an iconic, memorable soundtrack. You hear it, I've heard it in other media when they've parodied it and stuff like that. Um, the other is what was the other thing? Because I had a middle thing before going to the third thing. Now I can't think of it, so I'll swing back because I'm gonna say. And the third thing is a really great villain speech by Lime
Mhm.
that was heavily improvised by Wells himself. Um, and that often gets quoted and stuff like. I'll just do the end part here since it's in front of me, just to bring people up to speed. Don't be so gloomy. After all, it's not that awful. This is him, talking about his own life and proclivities and the things he's done. You know what the fellow said. In Italy, for 30 years after the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed. But they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace. And what did that produce? The cuckoo clock. So that's always been a really memorable speech.
And
And
all of that was improvised, or was
I
improv.
at least all that part was. Yeah, there's more to it at the beginning, but yeah, that whole part there about the comparison of
Wow.
Italy and Switzerland was improvised. Now it was improvised, but I've looked into it, and it's also seen that he's not the first person to come up with that sort of idea. There was an artist that had said something similar. I think even the American Whistler had said something similar about something about how environment doesn't necessarily always influence the talent of the artist or something like that. You can find more on Wikipedia. It said something about, you know, how Switzerland had this, like, they had everything. They had mountains and crystal clear lakes, but what did they produce? People ganging up on Switzerland. And, you know, I guess I wouldn't be me if I didn't point out that the statement is not exactly that accurate historically, but that's really not the point. I mean, the point is, and the point is, you know, the character himself, you know, if would say this sort of thing and not necessarily be paying attention to the details of history. I mean, that's part of his character. So it's nothing I mind. It's a bit of artistic. It's a bit of our artistic license. I mean, but since I can't help myself and I love to talk about this sort of thing, I'll just point out the Borgia did not rule Italy for 30 years, and they didn't actually rule all of Italy. They ruled Rome and some of the papal states, and they still had one of the popes, Alexander somebody there. His term was something like 9 years. And once that happened, that was the end of them. So you can't just put it all for that. And plus, at that point, the Renaissance had already been going on for about 100 years at that point. And it covered other places that they didn't touch, like Florence and places like that. In fact, that's where people like Michelangelo and Leonardo were from, Florence. So the Renaissance only really spread to Rome well after the Borgia had gone away. And besides that, and to talk about Switzerland as like some sort of cultural wasteland, that was being held back by all its years of peace is not entirely accurate either. They did have wars and fights and stuff. They got involved in things. In fact, their main export was the Swiss Guard, which was considered one of the finest mercenary groups in Europe. So the Swiss Guard fought in wars all over the continent. And of course, the cuckoo clock was invented in the Black Forest, I think, on the German side. So that's me just pointing out some stuff because I don't know, you know me, I have to be super accurate about history. But none of that to me detracts from the effectiveness of the speech. It's a great speech, and again, the fact that it isn't completely accurate totally fits the character anyway, because he's that kind of guy that just has sort of a certain amount of disdain for detail, and he just wants the broad strokes of things. So I had it somewhere marked down what sort of the other really sort of iconic thing about the movie was, besides the music, and that perhaps it was the sewer chase, I suppose. The movie's, of course, climax is all rather dramatic chase in the sewers. I'm not sure if that's the one or not, but I will just say that's sort of become a trope in itself in fiction. And it's kind of a joke, usually, the idea of this absurdly spacious sewer where people have this room to run around in. In this case, it's completely legit. Mm-hmm. The sewers in Vienna are like that in real life. In fact, a lot of that, some of it was on sets, but a lot of it was shot in the actual sewer. They were big and open like that. So that's kind of cool. Because, yeah, usually in fiction and stuff like Ninja Turtles, whatever, you see like these big sewers that everybody has room to move around and stuff, and it's not at all accurate. But in the case of Vienna, it is accurate. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I immediately thought of Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, our generation, the go-to for sewers is always going to be Ninja Turtles. But I can think of a pretty good sewer episode that predates even this movie by about 100 years, and that's the French writer Victor Hugo's sprawling novel Les Miserables, which actually has a pivotal sort of chase moment in the sewers of Paris. Where the embattled French cop, or the cop, they're all French. What am I saying? Everybody there is French. the cop, Inspector Javert, is chasing down our hero Jean Valjean, and they have a big confrontation in the sewer. And Paris, like Vienna, also did have sections where things were actually big and wide open, so it worked there too. But yeah, most stuff, particularly in North America, the sewers are not like that at all. I'm sure, again, since you're of that generation, you can remember there being like news reports and stories of like various kids in America and possibly Canada too, like getting themselves like hurt or stuck trying to go down to the sewers to meet the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, they realized it's not a lot of space in there.
Yeah, because I can remember, like, I didn't believe there were Ninja Turtles in the sewers, but I remember there's a sewer grate even on my street. and like
Right.
looking down and trying to see what I could see, and you know, it's all black, you can't see anything, you know. But there's not room to like run around down there, that's for sure.
Sewer meaning like a drainage, like where the water runoff goes, right?
Yeah.
Not like sewer is in like waste product. It's like
But I think we have both.
right, but I mean, I was just thinking like in the Ninja Turtles, I always was like, where's all the shit? Like, wouldn't it be full of like
Oh yeah, they'd be down
waste?
in the sewage. They'd be in the sewage for sure.
Yeah. But that's what this is. This is like drainage, right? It drains into the
Danube.
The Danby, I believe.
But anyway, yeah, so I think those are the things that always sort of stick out about the movie, even for people that don't know it. They're like, oh yeah. Maybe a distant part of that too is also that the speech itself takes place in a fairly famous Vienna landmark, which is that big Ferris wheel, which is still there to this day and remains a big tourist destination. I'm trying to remember what the hell it's called. I had it somewhere, but now I don't know. The Vienna or something. Anyway, it's a very large and cool
Rosenrad.
There you go.
Rosenrad.
Vienna Wassenrad, or however you know it. My accent's not great. I've never think of this. My mother can speak some German, but I can't. Yeah, it's there's the language bonus in this movie. If you can speak or understand German, there's some lines of German in this movie, so I couldn't understand it, but if you can, it might add a little bit to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the movie, basically, just for a setup, I guess, is we have an American arriving in Vienna, basically because he's pretty down on his luck. He's a writer. He writes pulp novels, particularly westerns, which were pretty popular back in the day. He even describes himself as like a hack writer, but he hasn't had a hit in a while, I guess, and having trouble paying the bills. So he hears from his friend Harry Lime, and he had known Harry since before the war, and I guess they even grew up together. They've been pretty good friends. Mm-hmm. And Harry had just been pretty vague on the details, but said, "Come to Vienna, and I can hook you up with a job." So that's where it comes from. So he comes, and immediately upon arriving, finds out that Harry Lime supposedly has died. And one of the first things he does is attend the man's funeral. And now he's thinking, well, I'm pretty screwed. I don't know anybody here, and I came to see my friend and the one person I knew, and he's dead, and things go from there. And it's interesting because of the different ride, I guess, it takes you on. Because I think at first most people think what the character of Anna says to him eventually. As, you know, he hears more details about the death, and everything sounds really strange about it. There's all these details that seem really odd and out of place and just weird. You know, the natural inclination, I think, for most people, the audience and the person in his shoes, is to think, yeah, maybe he was murdered, and Anna says something of that. And so that's really where you as the audience start off, I think, thinking, okay, his friend got killed because of something, so maybe we're trying to solve the mystery of his murder. And then, of course, the movie takes a different turn. And we already talked about, of course, we couldn't even be doing this if Harry Lime was actually dead, because Orson Welles is Harry Lime. So, of course, the big turn is that, of course, that Lime is not dead, and the reason the details of the death were so strange is because he had arranged it himself to fake his own death. And that was, you know, this idea that he was crossing the street, but he was hit by a truck. Turns out the person that was driving the truck was his own personal driver. Well, that's kind of a weird coincidence. One of the people on the scene was his own personal doctor. That seems like an interesting, weird coincidence too. And then he was there with another friend, you know, all this stuff. And now you understand why. It's because they were in on it. It was all basically because Lime is a criminal, which is something that is said early in the movie. Because when our main guy there, what's his name, Hawley Martins, when he's talking to the British cops there, because remember they're in the British sector, they just say, you know, good riddance to Lime. He was a crappy criminal. We're glad he's gone. And he just sort of discards that, like he doesn't believe them. He's like, oh, because he can't reconcile that with the man he knew, which is another big part of the movie, right? Was the idea that we find out that Lime didn't just come to Vienna and change and become a criminal. We find out he was always this way. He was just really good at hiding it. Lime is actually a very highly what's the word? Not capable, but a high functioning sociopath, I guess is what it is. And so, yeah, it's not like he came here and got mixed up in some dirty business or this or that changed him. It's like he was always this way. And when he thinks back and he remembers some details about him, it makes sense. Like he remembers that that Lime taught him how to like cheat at cards and stuff when they were young. So little things like that sort of add up. But yeah, that's the big revelation, and one of the major sort of themes about the movie, which fits in with some other themes that Wells has done before, which usually has to do with betrayal, usually between male friends. That's kind of a big thing, and also people's own preconceived notions when it comes to things like right and wrong and good and evil, which is very much a touch of evil as well. And this one, it's a little different thing because, yeah, the idea is, he thought he knew his friend, and even when the cops were saying things about him, he didn't believe them, and he had to face the man himself and have, Lime calmly explain to him, yeah, I'm a criminal, I don't give a shit, because he's talking about how, of course, so he's part of racketeering, which is a big problem in post-war Vienna, as people say, and it makes sense too. It gives people, from our era, a good sense of, again, sort of how chaotic Europe was at the time. You don't just come out of something like a massive conflict like World War II and everything just snaps back to normal. It's a slow process. And so you have all these people that are trying to make ends meet, and all these countries are up in each other's business, as we've seen here with the Allied occupation. So for a lot of people, it's very hard to get by. So a lot of them do turn to crime. But in the case of Lime, we see that he's just an opportunist. Mm-hmm. Because he's not even European. He's just come in because he's seeing a way to make a buck. And what he's been doing is working the black market. He's had an inside man at hospitals, and they were stealing drugs so that he could then sell them on the black market. And then, like, to make even more of a profit, he would, like, dilute them and water them down, which would actually render them ineffective, leading to people getting killed from it. And, he's even confronted with this, and Lime just shrugs his shoulders and says, I don't care. And then when they're up and this is the memorable part of the speech, but in the earlier part of the speech, when they're up above in the Ferris wheel, he just talks about how the people down below look like dots. And, that's sort of how he views them. He's just like, okay, so they're all dots. And so what if a few of those dots stop moving forever? What does it matter if I can make some money off it? So you see, he's a very cold-hearted, calculating sociopath. It's basically thinks, what's the cost of a few people getting killed if I can make a buck? Really. And we get to, again, see the stark reality of it, because there's a point where Martins feels just so disillusioned, disgusted and stuff, and he's really upset, but at the same time, he just wants to wash his hands of it and get out of Vienna when the cops are trying to convince him to help them to capture Lime in a sting. At first he wants no part of it, and then they bring him around to, the hospital, and they show him dying children that are a direct result of Lime's machinations. And so he can't walk away from that. I give credit for the movie for at least not milking it too much, because like the end of the scene is a shot of like the nurse clearing out, like, they don't show the dead kid, but clearing out the kid's things, and there's like a teddy bear, and she like tosses the teddy bear in the pile. The camera only holds on the bear for a second, which I thought was good restraint. I think a lot of filmmakers would milk that, maybe hold it for a few more beats to really bring it through. But anyway, so yeah, by then he's just like really confronted with the reality of, the horrible consequences of Lime's actions. And that's what convinces him that he will go ahead and help the cops out after all. And within that, we get, some various characters that are sort of part of the underground of Vienna, Vienna's seedy underbelly, if you want to call it, including, she's not exactly a femme fatale, but she's kind of like a femme fatale light, Anna, who had been Lime's girlfriend, although you never really know. Lime himself was, again, he's sort of incapable of caring for other people, and he even shrugs his shoulders about that, because he's just saying, because one of the subplots is we find out that she's actually from Czechoslovakia, and she's not supposed to be there, because a big part of Russia coming out of World War II and the Soviet Union was sort of trying to clamp down on all those territories the Soviet Union held back in the day, Czechoslovakia being a big one. So they were trying to repatriate people like that. So the whole idea was if the Soviet, basically, if the Soviet authorities caught her, they would ship her back to Czechoslovakia, and she'd be, under the much more harsh regime there than the at least slightly more free life she was living in Vienna. So that's one of the subplots. And when Martin says this line that she was facing deportation, he just sort of shrugs his shoulders and he's just like, well, that's how it goes, because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. And one of the sort of frustrating things about the movie is that she remains stubbornly dedicated to him, even as she learns more and more about his characters. And, the movie even ends on that note, that that she really cared for Lime, even though she really didn't have any good reason to. Which, I get it. We've seen that sort of things in our own lives. Maybe not examples that extreme, especially when, we've known people that were maybe in a bad relationship or something like that. It's just like, what do you see in this person? Leave them.
Right.
And yet, they for whatever reason, they remain dedicated.
Yeah, I thought she had a really unique look, and I looked her up. And did you know she was in Suspiria?
I had no idea. She's one of the ones at the school, huh?
Mm-hmm. One of the other teachers.
That's awesome. No, I didn't.
Yeah, quite a few years later, like, what does that be?
Almost
30.
Almost
Yeah.
30 years, yeah. Because Suspiria is what, 77?
Mm-hmm. Nailed it.
So 49, 77. I usually do. But, yeah, this is usually the most significant movie she was in of the era, because I did look into her before. Her name is... She was actually a baroness, which is pretty interesting.
Really?
Yeah. I guess she was married to somebody up high. She had a long life, too. She only died about 10 years ago. But, so, yeah, she actually was Italian, so it makes sense she'd be in Suspiria.
So she was born in Italy, which is now a part of Croatia.
Oh, wow.
I didn't realize they changed that.
Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff moved around a lot. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. But yeah, she was a baroness from the time she was... I can't see the age. But anyway, I hadn't seen her anything else as far as I know. But she was in a couple Italian movies that I looked up that were, like, I guess, really censored because it was under Mussolini's regime. So, yeah, it was, again, as we said, a very interesting time period during and after World War II, all the chaos that was going on in Europe.
Mm.
And yet you still have these people forming careers in movies. Oh, man, you know what? She's in a movie that we did for this channel. She's in Eyes Without a Face.
That's French, isn't it?
Yeah.
Huh.
It is. Sans Visage. I don't even remember what character she was. Obviously she would have been too old to be the daughter, so she wasn't the daughter. She must have been like the, Oh, yeah, she must have been the whatever she was, the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, not maid, but what I mean, yeah, the person that ran the household for the crazy doctor. That must have been her. So how about that? I didn't even know that. So yes, so if people are interested, we did do another episode of the movie that she was in. Eyes Without a Face.
Wow, she's had quite a lucrative career.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's in the 40s. That's 60 and then 77.
Yeah, she managed to be in significant movies throughout the decades, which is pretty good. She had a pretty interesting life. She was a baroness. In the early 40s, she was her boyfriend was a famous Italian fighter pilot. He was a fighter pilot. He actually died in 41.
You know what? I think she was the daughter.
Really? I'm surprised she looked that. Could you that youthful?
Maybe I'm wrong.
Because that would have been 11 years after this movie.
Right. I mean, she's second build.
Yeah.
Eyes Without a Face.
I can't imagine that she's the daughter. She was born in 21, so she would have been about 40 now by that time. But anyway, Alida Veli is what she was mostly known of, her short thing. Her full name is Baroness Alida Maria Laura Altenburger von Markschenstein-Frohnberg.
Holy shit.
That's some old school Europe right there for you.
Man. I'm jealous. I'm jealous of such a cool name.
It's pretty epic. But yeah, the main guy is Joseph Cotton, which is a name I know, and I know I've seen him some things. He's just sort of an everyman character as far as this goes. I guess kind of similar to some of the noir heroes, because really the whole idea of these noir heroes is that they usually it takes them a long time to be effective. They usually spend most of the movie stumbling around and getting beat up and getting led on and getting double crossed and stuff. And then finally, like in like the last scene of the movie, they manage to do something that might partially save the day. Because again, noir doesn't usually have a super happy ending, and this one doesn't at all. Although Lime is brought to justice, I suppose, it still ends on a pretty down note. But the ride is very interesting. One of the things I like to say about this movie, that like the highest praise I can give it, is I just think it's a really efficient movie. I don't think there's a single line of dialogue or even a single like camera shot that is wasted. I feel like it's so economical. I feel like everything just comes together and moves the story forward as it should. And even when you have something that doesn't necessarily move the story forward, what it's doing is it might create atmosphere. The movie has a lot of really good atmosphere. You know, it has just such a great setting, post-war Vienna, with its cool, narrow cobblestone streets and interesting European architecture. There's just a lot of really good shots that, yeah, I guess you can't really say is great cinematography there, because kind of anybody can do it with the subject matter at hand. But it looks good. There's some interesting shots. We talked about this before. They do this a lot in noir, and I think they did it also in Touch of Evil, where sometimes maybe somebody going down a street or a hallway, and the camera will be kind of on an angle, so everything looks off.
That's what I was reading, and I didn't remember a lot of that. I think I need to go back and rewatch some of those scenes.
Like there's definitely a few really clear ones that I can recall. For the reveal of Lime, when he first comes down on the street and gets Lime to step out of the shadows, there's some very askew shots there where it's kind of like
a Dutch angle type thing.
Yeah, that's the term. Dutch angle. So that's where it's most striking that I can remember is that. I also think that's a really great scene. It's a wonderful reveal. So we've got him. So we got our main character up there.
When the lights flash on and then he's gone and they flash off.
Yeah, it's really cool. Very stylistic, and it's probably been imitated in other movies since.
I'm sure, yeah.
Highly stylistic film, but yeah, I was going to say something about the main character and the actor, but now I can't. I can't remember. But anyway, that's Martins. But yeah, so we got Martins going around, and he's just basically trying to piece this together, and gets involved with some other characters, particularly the two British cops. What is it? Which of course they're part of the army too, because all at this point all the law enforcement is tied into army. And I don't think they really talk about it much, but I thought it was, and I guess it's not as important an angle. At least they don't talk about it, but I wondered if this might factor into the plot. So when we were doing the other one, Touch of Evil, one thing that was kind of interesting about Touch of Evil, made it different from other sort of crime noir plots, was the idea of jurisdiction, because it was in a border town. Some of the action happened in Mexico, some of it happened in the U.S., and we had the cops talking about sort of the difficulties that does present when working a case. This movie doesn't seem to talk about it, but I have to wonder if it's part of it, because again, the idea is the city is split into 4 zones, and I have to imagine that obviously that means that each fourth only has jurisdiction within that area. So I had to imagine, and I guess they didn't need to say this, but I filled in the blank myself. This is why Lime is able to operate so well. Because when Martins first gets there, at this point, everybody thinks Lime is dead. But Lime is basically a well-known criminal. Like, the authorities, they know. And so you might ask yourself, so how come they haven't caught him? For me, I figure it must be because he's able to just go between the zones and flout that, so that jurisdiction always becomes a problem. If he's ever getting too much heat from one place, he just goes into the next. I figure that's what happened, but they don't actually talk about it in the movie, which I guess is fine, because we've often said, it's annoying when sometimes for the sake of a narrative, if a movie feels the need to outright state stuff and tell the audience stuff. So I don't know if that's a misstep or not, or maybe I'm even wrong, but that's kind of how I saw it. I figured, okay, that's why that's why Lime is still able to be an effective criminal, despite the fact that he seems to be very well known to the authorities. And I guess the other thing too is that we're coming into a situation where crime is kind of rampant, and we get the idea that the cops have more than they can really reasonably deal with. Because as I said, when he meets one of the other characters, they said so, like Lime was caught up in some racketeering, and he's just like, everybody in this town's in racketeering. That's just how, that's just how it is.
Brush it off. Yeah, everybody's involved in some sort of shenanigans,
dirty dealings,
yeah,
and such. But I'd also like to point out that Switzerland also produced Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a really great philosopher, and Carl Jung. So there you go. Switzerland had some good contributions. Which is funny too that he's bashing Switzerland. They're not in Switzerland; they're in Austria. I know they're very similar, but anyway, that's it still is a great speech. I like it a lot, and I realize that he's just making a point. It didn't really matter where they were geographically; they could have been in Hong Kong, and he would have said the same thing because he's making a point. But I found some of the rest of the speech from before that I'll just say because again, it's just to give a good indication of the way Lime views his activities and how little he cares about it. Victims, don't be melodramatic. Look down there. Tell me, would you really feel any pity if one of those dots stopped moving forever? If I offered you 20,000 pounds for every dot that stopped, would you really, old man? Tell me to keep my money, or would you calculate how many dots you could afford to spare? Free of income tax, old man. Free of income tax. The only way you can save money nowadays. So, yeah, and just while Lime doesn't have a ton of screen time compared to a lot of villains in cinema, I just think that he's just so memorable with lines like that. That really makes him effective. But yeah, but the structure of the plot is another thing I really admire about the movie. I like that Lime isn't seen at all for the first two acts. It makes it more interesting.
Yeah. Well, you're guessing the whole time too.
Mm-hmm.
The viewer.
Yeah, and like I said, I think for most people, we would be on the same track as the main character, not thinking that Lime is a mastermind or anything, or even maybe he's alive. We're thinking he got killed, he got caught up in something. Oh, who killed him? What's the mystery there? And it turns out to be pretty different. Well constructed plot. I'm trying to think of some stuff about Welles, specifically about the movie. I've heard conflicting stories and read conflicting things, some saying that he was pretty annoying on set.
Yeah.
And that for a lot of the sewer stuff, at first there's for a lot of those faraway shots, those are body doubles because they couldn't get him on set half the time. But then they said that he got really enthusiastic and got really into it later on. So I don't know, but I can certainly believe that there's a lot of body double stuff going on there because you don't really necessarily need anybody for that. But again, getting back to the cinematography thing, some of those shots from the sewer just are so good. And there is some good stylistic stuff there going on. They would pour water on the cobblestones so they'd reflect the light.
That's such a cool technique. It's something that you would never think of.
Mm-hmm. Just a fairly really simple, really.
Yeah,
but with a really great effect. Yeah, that's one of the things I like the best. But yeah, that whole sequence, I don't think anybody watching it would necessarily say that it's a really tension-filled sequence. You kind of know what's going to happen, but it's really dramatic, and I just really like how it's done and how none of it is hurried. Which is another thing I like of the ending shot too, is that isn't hurried. Is the whole thing is he gets out of the car when he sees her, so he's going to wait by the road, and she's coming up, and you have to wait a while because she's just walking, and the whole thing, they let it take the time that it takes. They don't cut it, or they don't speed it up or anything. We get to watch her walk the length of this area and then walk right past him and walk out of frame, and then it still keeps going. And I like what he does next. He just sort of looks down, and then he sort of casually takes out a cigarette and lights it. because I don't know, it really just sort of fits the whole aesthetic of the movie, and theme wise too, the whole noir feel of the movie. Yeah, it's like shit happens. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Which is kind of like the echoing sentiment of most noir movies.
It
Because
really
usually when they're over, maybe things are somewhat resolved, but usually they're worse than when they started. And this is kind of in the middle. It's like, well, Lime has been brought to justice, but our guy didn't get anything out of it. In fact, he still had to not just face the fact that he was never really, this guy that he thought was his friend was never really his friend, but also was a really bad guy, and then also he was the one who killed him himself. And now he's just sort of right back where he started. He might as well just go back to the U.S. because he's got nothing going on here. Because the one thing he thought was, well, maybe I made some sort of connection with this woman. Nope. She's still all tied up with her feelings for Lime, and so she just completely rejects him and goes right by him. But usually that's kind of a staple of noir too. Is you'll often have kind of like the ending is kind of like a push.
Mm-hmm.
You'll often have it like the protagonist is no worse off maybe, but he's no better either. It's like it's just he's kind of right back where he started. That happens in a lot of noir stories. Even in some of the more neo-noir stuff, like that's basically a movie I talk about that's not very deep or anything, and it's a mostly forgotten movie that I admit is not that good, but I like is Last Man Standing. Last Man Standing is kind of the exact same way. When Last Man Standing is over, they're like dozens of people are dead, and it's all for basically nothing.
Right.
And the main character who was trying to do something by getting this going has in no way profited it. And he's just back where he started, which is kind of what I like about it. Now, this movie doesn't have quite that much death in it, although there's plenty of death that's, again, implied and referenced, because obviously while Lime has been doing this for a while, he's been causing a lot of harm and a lot of death. So at least by Lime getting killed, that halts that. Although, again, we all know because of the situation, somebody will just step in and take his place.
Right.
But still, we have to at least think that, well, maybe it'll slow down a bit because Lime was particularly good at it because he was really, he's really sort of uniquely suited to it because of being basically a sociopath. So, and this is also a time where sometimes I complain about when things are off screen. Like, I like that his death is off screen. It's more effective that way. You just hear the shot, and then you see, Holly walk out like holding the gun. So sometimes, yeah, I know people have heard me criticize things happening off screen. I'm not saying that it can't ever be used effectively. I think it's used to great effect here. It definitely is the way to go.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's done to save money. To save having to shoot that.
Yeah, it's either to save money or also if it's particularly violent or shocking, just to like spare the audience it.
Oh yeah, true.
Especially if it's a movie that's like PG-13 or something like, we don't want to have an R rating, so we'll cut away for this particularly violent part. And people like that start getting annoyed because especially when it's for movies that like, well, that's the point. Like, if it's a slasher or something, we want to see the violence.
Right.
But in something like this, it makes total sense and fits in very well narratively and stylistically, I think. But yeah, if you've seen The Stranger, there's a lot of things from that kind of fit into this movie, but I think it's just way better in this movie than The Stranger, which actually was directed by Welles. But I mean, The Stranger's okay, and also in that, Welles is playing a really bad guy in that, because in The Stranger, he's playing basically a Nazi war criminal that has fled to the U.S. and is in hiding, pretending to be an ordinary guy. So, and you do see some of the things he does that are evil. Like there's a part where the only guy that knew who he was, who thought he was his friend, he murders him out in the woods. And then when he's living with his wife, one of the dogs that he owns goes out and I think finds the body. So then he murders the dog too. So again, that's a really evil character too. But I like Lime more. Lime's just more interesting, I guess, especially because of the way he talks and his cool dialogue and his speeches. And just the way that and just his contempt for humanity, which I really think is interesting.
So, what did you think about the character of Holly Martins? in general.
I mean, he's kind of standard for the genre,
Mm-hmm.
in that his job is basically to carry the idiot ball around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Again, part of being kind of the noir hero is to subvert all the hero tropes and just sort of bumble and screw up. And I mean, it's not really his fault. Like he doesn't really ever do anything overtly stupid.
Yeah.
He's an American guy that's suddenly over in this strange European city that has this crazy tense political situation going on. He doesn't know anybody. He doesn't even know the language, and he can only really know what people tell him when they deign to speak to him. So basically, he's going from sort of character to character, getting the runaround. Some of them are, holding things back. Some others are outright lying to him. And at the same time, the one thing he's holding on to is that for most of the time at first, he believes that Harry Lime was probably a good guy, and that Harry Lime has died, and that, a crime is committed, and he needs to get to the bottom of it. And that, of course, all turns out to be wrong, too. So, I mean, the character himself, there's nothing really that separates him too much from most of those noir heroes. Again, their job is to sort of go around and get lied to or humiliated or even beaten up. He doesn't get beaten up in this movie, although he does get chased. There's a part where after he's been humiliated a little, this really doesn't have much to do with the plot. Remember, he gets invited to like that weird writer symposium. They recognize him, like, oh, you're a writer. Right. You can stand up and say some stuff about writing. And he's so distracted and he has no idea what to say when they're asking him questions. And then when the other guy, Popolutz or whatever his name, comes in, the guy that he knew was an associate of Lime's comes in, and he recognizes him. He starts saying, oh, dropping hints about he thinks something fishy is going on, saying, oh, I'm going to write this story called The Third Man and stuff. And he's like, I think you should stick to fiction. And he's like, screw you. Then suddenly two like guys that are clearly, intimidating thugs come in. He has to go on the run. So he does get chased, although it's not really a big chase scene. It's funny, though. He does get a little of that weird, again, noir humiliation where he gets like pecked by a cockatoo of all things.
Yeah.
Which is pretty funny. So his character's fine, but he's just sort of standard for what the genre demands. And again, the ending is kind of what you expect too, like where he's developed feelings for this woman, although you don't really know why, because she's been nothing but cold to him, really. But he's hoping something's there, and then she just, completely rejects him and goes by, and he just doesn't react. He just lights a cigarette. So, I mean, he's not that interesting of a character, but that's not really the point. He's just sort of supposed to run through this and take this ride that the audience goes on. So it doesn't really bother me that he's kind of a flat character, because to me, that's the point. And he fits sort of the standard writer tropes in that, like, he's too much of a romantic for his own good, and also clearly he likes a drink.
Yeah.
Which really is how it goes usually with most writers, particularly writers in fiction, but writers in real life too.
Mm-hmm.
We wear our hearts on our sleeves and we get drunk. I always say, maybe I would be a more successful and effective writer if I was an alcoholic.
Yep. Or took like absinthe all the time.
I know. There was a period where I was really obsessed with the idea of getting some absinthe.
I've had some, but it didn't have, wormwood in it. It was just...
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing. There's the absinthe that...
You got to have the possibility of dying, or it doesn't count.
Exactly. But yeah, his character's fine. He's par for the course. I certainly don't have any complaints about him, because he fulfills his role, more or less.
Yeah, so the sewers eventually like that becomes like a character in and of itself.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite parts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, probably is my favorite part.
Yeah, you're right. That's been like aped by so many other movies.
Yeah, a dramatic chase or standoff, even in like the Fugitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great moment. I can remember there's a part in one of my favorite video games, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, where after you've been captured and tortured, you manage to break out of the base. And to escape the base, you're running through the sewers, and you're being chased by teams with dogs, and you can always hear the dogs like barking in the background. It's really well done. It's a really good thing. And the maker of that, Hideo Kojima, he's super influenced by cinema, so he probably got that from something like this, or maybe something that was ripping this off.
Is that a third person perspective?
Yeah, that's third person. Yeah. That might be my favorite of the series. Not to go on about it, but when it comes to Metal Gear Solid series, for me, the odd number ones are the good ones. They're all good, but I've always found 2 and 4 fairly disappointing. But 1, 3, and 5, I adore. They're awesome. And 3, of course, is set in '64 and has the total Cold War backdrop to it, which is so great. I really like that. So yeah, while this movie has the Cold War backdrop, it's not really about that. It's not necessarily political. But you still get little hints of it here and there, mostly with the stuff about the Soviet police.
In '99, John McTiernan was supposed to direct a remake with Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor.
I like those actors fine, but not everything needs a remake. See, to me, this holds up completely fine. For a movie that is super old. I mean, 1949, that's old. We're not kidding ourselves. It's old. But it holds up for what it is. I just don't see how it could be improved by, like, color or, modern camera techniques or whatever. This movie only has, like, 3 gunshots in it. I feel like they'd feel like to have, like, a gunfight in it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be stupid and forgettable. I mean, yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what their intention was, where they would set it. Like, that movie was set in its time because it works so well. As we said, post-war Europe being such an interesting area, and then you have places like the city of Vienna with being occupied by Allied forces, and it was true that there was a lot of black market and criminal stuff going on there. Obviously, things like that exist to this day, but I'm just wondering if they remade it, where would they set it? Would it still be in Vienna? Because guess what? 21st Vienna is not very much like that, so it had to be. So it'd probably be somewhere else. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't put it somewhere else, but I don't know where they put it. And
it'd be like Hong Kong or somewhere. I mean, really?
Yeah, maybe. Like, I can see how it works, but as we said,
I can't think of anywhere in Europe that would be able to, mimic that right now, right off.
I mean, there's still areas of Europe to this day with, like, various, like, political and unrest and stuff, but it doesn't have that, grandiose to it, I guess is the word.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the point of remaking it would be. I mean, from the studio's perspective, like, name recognition, you think, like, modern day audiences are gonna, recognize that title?
No, they are not.
And even if they did, they probably wouldn't go see a remake of it. It's, I mean, you're talking about, like, cinema snobs, that would actually know what that is.
It's not like everybody flocked to see the Psycho remake.
Oh God,
Psycho is way more well known than this movie.
I mean, I guess you could say, like, the Italian Job or something. That's one that actually was successful.
Yeah, it's not a bad remake.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did pretty well too. So that, I don't know what year that came out, but it seems like right around that
03, I think. I saw it in theater. I think it was 03. It's not a bad movie. The best part about it is they do some creative things with, like, those minis, those cars. Yeah. It's pretty cool. That's probably the most memorable thing about the movie.
It's Ed Norton, right?
Yeah, Ed Norton's like the bad guy.
That's probably why you saw it.
I'm a huge Ed Norton fan. That's not really a role that matters that much. Right. I don't care. But I mean, it's kind of interesting. He's the bad guy, but yeah. It's like Marky Mark and the tall blonde whose name I never, ever remember.
Charlize
Theron, thank you. Yeah, they, like, team up, and Donald Sutherland was her father. Yeah, I remember. I haven't seen it in 100 years, but I remember it pretty well.
Yeah. I haven't seen the original, so.
I've seen, like, a bit of the original, a piece of it. I don't mind stuff like that, like, because it's sort of like a thriller heist thing, the same way, like, they did with Ocean's 11. That was an old movie that they remade and gave a new twist to, and that worked just fine.
And they've remade it again last year, right?
Yeah, I guess Ocean's 8 is technically, I guess, like a remake in a way, isn't it? I didn't see it, but
I didn't either.
It's not a sequel, so I guess it must be technically kind of like a
I
remake
mean,
slash reboot
they
type
made
thing.
like what, at least a few sequels of the first one, or I
Oh
mean
yeah,
the original remake.
yeah. I hated the sequels.
Yeah,
Like it's been that's one of my. I've had various moments of disappointment at the cinema, and this isn't in the top, but a significant one was like seeing Ocean's 12 in the cinema, because I thought Ocean's 11 was fun and quirky and clever and just enjoyable, and 12 was just such a slog, and it was so up its own ass, like thinking it was clever when it wasn't, and thinking it was funny when it wasn't. So dumb.
was Jet Li in the first one?
No, I don't think that's him. I don't think
That's not Jet Li. Okay,
I don't know who that guy is, but
it's
yeah,
a
they had like a Chinese guy that like could do contortions and
smaller
stuff.
Asian man. Yeah,
But I don't think he was a martial artist like Jet Li.
can I look it up?
I mean, maybe it was, but I think I would remember because I know Jet Li so well.
Who was the additional 12th member? Was that Julia Roberts?
Yeah, I think so. And they had that whole thing about Julia Roberts being a real person in that universe and her looking
Yeah.
like it.
Oh
Like, how
man.
dumb is that? And they had Bruce Willis as himself too. Like,
Oh,
Jesus
yeah.
Christ! Like, talk about taking you out of things. Because it's funny because actually the first movie does that a tiny little bit, but it's so small it doesn't matter. Because you might remember that the movie starts with the first person he recruits is Brad Pitt's character,
Mhm.
and when he goes to see Brad Pitt's character, what he's doing is he's teaching actors how to play like poker, and they're all actors who are playing themselves. Most memorably, Topher Grace. It's Topher Grace playing Topher Grace. It's pretty funny because he's acting like what you expect. Like I'm like a dumb idiot actor with money and I don't know what to do. I want to be cool. So you could say it's kind of weird that this is a universe where Brad Pitt and George Clooney obviously don't exist, but Topher Grace does. But that's fine because it's just some TV actors, whatever. But in the second one, they just blow it all up to hell because it's like, okay, yeah, Brad Pitt and George Clooney are not in this universe, but yeah, Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis are. Oh, and also we have a character being played by Julia Roberts, so the whole point is she looks like Julia Roberts. Like, ugh.
God.
The second one, the Ocean's 13, I don't remember being quite as bad, but it's still not very good. There's this whole thing where like Matt Damon's character has to like seduce some older woman.
Oh,
And
God, Matt Damon's in it? Man.
Oh yeah, he's one of the main characters. You don't remember that?
Wow.
He's one of the 11.
That's like one of the most fuckable casts of any movie ever.
Yeah, that's
like,
what
I mean, they're all like top, top handsome actors or whatever you want to call it.
You got 2001 Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Matt Damon.
And hell, Casey Affleck.
Yeah, I forgot about Casey Affleck, but that's right. Yeah, he's one of the two brother guys.
But no, it was
again. I haven't seen it in so long. I want to watch it again.
The Chinese guy was Shibo Quinn, and I feel really racist for thinking that was Jet Li because I swear I thought that was Jet Li. But my fault.
Don't put Jet Li in movie if he's not kicking
apologies.
people.
He's but yeah, apparently that's all he's ever done is those 3 movies, and then he was in Ocean's 8 also.
Yeah, I think because he's like a real life, like what he's supposed to be in the movie. Like I don't think acting's like his main job. I think he's like a contortionist performer. He might have done like Cirque du Soleil type stuff.
He's 4'11" and 3/4.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It was really tiny. I mean, yeah.
So
but,
yeah,
I do like the first movie, and I've seen parts of the original, and it's kind of boring. It's Frank Sinatra and a bunch of guys.
oh God, it sounds boring.
Yeah, for that one, like the plot's pretty different. Like in the other one, like it's like Danny Ocean is like sort of like this known con man, and he has like this group of guys that he knows, and they're like gonna pull off the score. In the original, like Frank Sinatra's the main guy, and the whole idea was they were all like in the same unit in World War II together, and now for some reason they want to rob a casino. Like what? How does one lead to the other? But anyway,
it sounds like other movies I've seen around that period of time.
Plus, it's just so much easier to rob a casino in the '60s. I mean, we talked about this before. Like if you're a criminal, you have to like have like new ideas or doing new kind of crime, like cybercrime or something. Because all this other kind of crime that we talk about, like when like Drugstore Cowboy, we were talking about when we did that show, like you just can't do that anymore. You can't just walk into a pharmacy or whatever and clean them out just because those people are distracted. Everything's locked up. There's cameras everywhere. And of course, when we talked about serial killers, I mean, this is a very good thing, but the golden age of serial killers was like the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can still be a serial killer now, but you have to be good and lucky because law enforcement has gotten a lot better at tracking you. And again, plus there's things like, you know, in the 70s, you're like, I'm a crazy serial killer and I like to rape and kill women.
Oh, man.
Good thing I can just drive around and pick them up because everybody hitchhikes and doesn't think there's anything weird about it. And,
I mean, look,
you know,
look at
and if I go into like a store, you know, on the highway, there's no camera there,
right.
you know, recording me, so nobody can put me in the area. You know, it's so easy.
There's so many stories of guys, you know, that were serial killers like in the 60s and 70s that, I mean, they almost got caught all the time. I mean, they made so many mistakes, yet they never got caught. Like, you know, as long as you traveled a little bit, you know, like
yeah, just move around.
Was it Henry Lee Lucas? Like he had Adam, I forget the kid, who's the guy that hosted America's Most Wanted.
Yeah, I know.
His son's head was in his trunk for like a week. He drove around with it, and there's another guy just had a dead body like sitting in the passenger seat, and he just told the police that he was asleep. You know, it's like it's. I mean, you basically had to be like literally caught red-handed, like with a dead person, like on you, to actually get busted.
That's another reason why, like a lot of killers now do like the mass shooting thing because it's just the simpler way if you want a body count, because to like effectively like kill people individually in different places at different times has become so difficult because of, again, things like law enforcement finding it and evidence and just all the evidence trail, like cameras being everywhere or there being like records of you buying weapons and stuff like that. Back then, you know, I go to a hardware store and, you know, bought like a big, huge knife or whatever, and everyone's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like spree killer is classified differently than serial killer, right?
It is, yeah.
Even though you may have killed more people, you're a spree killer.
Yeah, but nowadays, as I've said, some people have been reevaluated. Like I can't remember which one, but of the two killers at Columbine, one of them was, you know, more like kind of the leader, and the other guy kind of went. You know, he was obviously. The idea was basically one of them. Possibly if somebody had spoken to him and he'd gotten like help and medication, he might have never ever done anything and might have just been able to lead a normal life with, you know, medication and therapy. Whereas the other one, I think it was Dylan Klebold, was basically he was like a psychopath, and, you know, there's not really any cure for that. And a lot of people said, you know, if it had been like 1979, 1990 instead of 1999, he might have been like one of those like serial killers. So yeah, there's certain people out there now that have done like, you know, mass shootings or spree killings where it's more because of the era they're in, where they've kind of seen that's the way to go.
So you think they're like crazy, they want to kill a lot of people, but they know they're not going to be able to get away with it. So their answer to that is just to do it all at once. Yeah,
I think so. Not all of them, but a lot of them. That's why we've seen this. One of the reasons we've seen the trend change, right? Because it's not like, because people say, oh, there's like, yeah, it's true. You know, TV's obsessed with serial killers, and Criminal Minds is really another serial killers. But serial killers are kind of at an all-time low. Well, it's not because, you know, people have gotten better or nicer or things like that. It's because things have changed in that way. Now people that might have been, doing those methods are doing different methods now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you got to think about it like the ones that aren't motivated by sexual means. Because I mean, like, you know, the big ones. Like,
that's the big thing. That's the big thing, right? If you're really motivated by sexual means, then a spree shooting's not going to do it for you. Right. And that's why we'll still always have some.
But like Bundy, Gacy, Dahmer, they were all, you know, sexual dudes, like the big ones.
Yeah. And people like that still exist, but the good news is it's a lot harder for people like that to operate.
Right. They go to prison. Like, they do it like a few times and they go to prison. That's what, I guess. Theoretically, that's why you don't see as many that go on for that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we said, if somebody like that existed now, it would be a lot more challenging.
Or maybe they found some sort of like legal way to deal with it. Like, they just buy like a blow up doll and just like yell at it. And
I'm all for that if it doesn't, result.
If it works, sure.
Actual people getting raped and murdered and stuff. Yeah,
I don't know. Those sex dolls have gotten pretty realistic. Maybe they can get it, and you pretend like it's your mom because you hate your mom so much.
Yeah, stab a sex doll. I don't care.
Yeah,
At least that's a victimless crime.
that's my campaign slogan.
Feel like murdering people? Stab a sex doll.
Real dolls. We're gonna put all our money on buying realistic dolls for these crazy people. And chemical castration.
Yeah, but I like the more subtle villain, like somebody like I said, like a Harry Lime. I mean, I love the out there villains in movies too, but Harry Lime's cool because he's just so calm and composed, and he's fully aware of what he does and how it affects people, and he just doesn't care, and he's got like his own, justification for it. And I like how he tries to draw Martins into it too. He's like, "Oh, come on, you do the same thing." It's like, no, I wouldn't. Like, I wouldn't sell black market medicine that literally kills children just to make a buck. But for somebody like Lime, he just thinks, "Oh yeah, everybody would do it because it's because that's the thing." Like,
because he's a sociopath. Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. They just think that's what's normal. They're like, I'm normal. It's the rest of the world that's weird. Like, why are you going out of your way to help people if it doesn't help you? That doesn't make sense. Like, that's how they see it, right? Like if there's no benefit to be seen for themselves, they literally can't comprehend it. It's like, why would you do that? It's not helping you. Yeah. So Lime's one of my favorite examples of that, and Wells just does such a great job of conveying it, because nowadays I think too, when a lot of these characters are being portrayed on screen, there is this temptation or whatever to really go out there and make it larger than life and over the top and stuff, because that's how people want to view villains, I guess, all the time. And I mean, there's certain things that call for it, but we don't need to always see it. We don't always need like the killer that's, babbling and ranting and raving, or, making weird facial tics and stuff like that. Like, we get it. Yes. Some characters, some people are like that, but they don't all have to be like that. If I can really stretch this into a weird comic book tie-in to bitch, it's one of my main problems, and there's many problems, and we're not going to get into it, but, we both talked about how much the stupid Batman versus Superman movie is. And one of the things I cannot stand about it, and there are many, is, of course, they've got a really different Lex Luthor portrayal. And then they later say, oh, it's Alexander Luthor. It's Jesse Eisenberg, right?
Yeah.
And there's multiple times in that movie where they're presenting Lex Luthor in a way that is completely not in step with the comics. Now, again, yes, Lex Luthor, let's get at his core, is a villain. He's a bad guy, and he basically is like a psychopath / sociopath in that he doesn't have empathy for other people, only cares about himself, and he's completely willing to go out, hurt other people or even kill them to achieve his means. But after that, there's different layers, and they completely split off. And I can't stand how they do with Jesse Eisenberg, because they have this idea, and they even have musical cues. You probably don't even remember this because you purged it from your memory, but I remember. So there's even musical cues to like play up that like he's got a whole bunch of like madness just dancing behind his eyes. And they really play it up at the very end, like, because there's this part where, like, I don't know, like where he has like this like last conversation with somebody, and then he's just sort of talking to himself, and it like zooms in on like a shot of like some like painting that was in his house that has like demons in it or something, and you've got like violins doing like really high like again, they're trying to say like there's the psychopath, the craziness, like just dancing behind the eyes, like under the surface he's like nuts, and you can see just, and he does talk, and he has like weird little tics and stuff like that, and I'm thinking that's not Lex Luthor though. The whole point of Lex Luthor is he doesn't have those tics. He's completely in control and calm. And the only time he ever like loses it emotionally is like in really specific situations where he knows nobody else will see it, like probably right before he kills somebody, and so nobody else will ever see it. He would never like lose face in front of people, like in public and stuff like that. So that was one of, like, again, there are a zillion problems with that movie, and obviously I think Jesse Eisenberg's totally wrong for the part anyway. But even if Jesse Eisenberg was right for the part, like physically and stuff, which obviously he isn't, even if he was, it's played all wrong, because they have this idea that it's like, because I think it's because everybody's obsessed with the Joker, right? It's like, oh, he's like the Joker too. It's like, no, he's not. He's bad and evil in his own way. But everybody's just so obsessed with like the Joker and things like that everything has to be like that. And so that really pissed me off. So this is all well before that, but I really like a character like Harry Lime because he's really evil and stuff, but there's nothing over the top
Right.
or, you know, it's very real world
Realistic, exactly.
and realistic. And we talked about this before too. We talk about like psychopaths and sociopaths, and the truth is, society is absolutely full of sociopaths. Just most of them don't overtly commit crimes, and a lot of them don't really feel the need to. But that doesn't mean they still don't do horrible
Right.
things, you know? Like they'll do things that are completely legal, but still absolutely reprehensible stuff. You know, if they work at a company, they'll tell lies or they'll plant the right seeds to like destroy people so they can get above them and work and stuff like that. Like that's all over the place. And unfortunately, we live in a society that rewards this kind of behavior. We like to
To
pretend we don't, but we do.
yeah, to an extent, yeah.
We live in a society where everybody's pitted in
Well,
competition with each other.
it's yeah, do what you need to do to get ahead, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not one of those people that's like we should abandon capitalism, and because I don't, I don't have a better alternative. But the truth is, capitalism is basically based about making everybody compete. People
Mm-hmm.
say it's like great. It's not. It's not great at all. But I don't have a solution. And I'm saying, oh, everything should be free or communist or anything like that. No, that has its own problems too. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't think there's any perfect system.
no, there isn't. But yeah, where we're at right now, it just everything is so competitive, and it gets to the point where yeah, we act all shocked when somebody steps out of what we think is acceptable, and it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be so shocked because we've like set up this system where actually some people feel that that's what's required, or et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this movie has very much sort of the Pyrrhic victory type ending, as we said. Because I also forgot to say that Sergeant Payne gets killed too. He's one of the two British cops, so he does die. So we do see Harry kill one person. So yeah, by the time it's over, things aren't exactly in ruins or in tatters. The bad guy is dead or done, but things are still pretty much. Martins does not get the girl. The girl will probably be the Soviets will probably deport her back to Czechoslovakia, and God knows what they'll do from her from
Yeah,
there.
I know.
Like Soviet law, they'll probably put her in a gulag. They were pretty rough. This is Stalin's era, right? So there's all sorts of stuff going on here that's certainly kind of a downer, but that's how these noir stories work. We've often, as on the show, talked about things that like Siskel and Ebert like. This is again a favorite of Ebert, and he thought Lime might be his favorite film villain. So once again, something I agree with Ebert on. I disagree on a lot, but we both like that.
Something I was reading was it was released by Criterion, and it was almost immediately like they lost the rights, like almost immediately after they released it. So they didn't put out very many copies, and it's like worth quite a bit
Oh wow.
On DVD and Blu-ray.
Yeah, I'd really like to get a Criterion Blu-ray of that. So they had to stop printing it, is what you're saying?
I believe so. It went back to Studio Canal.
Oh man.
I believe. I'm not sure what happened there, but
yeah. I mean, this actually isn't a Welles film, as far as I mean. So it has its own different thing because as we've spoken, a lot of the Welles film, particularly after this period that he did, have a lot of weird like rights issues because of the way producers were involved. A lot of different independent producers, so it always made the distribution rights and stuff like that. It always made that kind of a quagmire, which is also in part why a lot of his movies never got finished.
Mm-hmm.
Which is another thing we will talk about as the series goes on. We'll save that for the last episode. I think what we're going to do going forward from here, this isn't set in stone, people, but is for the next episode, I think we might as well, why not do Citizen Kane? Because why not? It is Citizen Kane. And I was thinking for the fourth one, we will end on, was what I planned all along, we will end on The Other Side of the Wind, which is one of Wells's unfinished movies that has just in the last year or so been in some manner finished. So I'm kind of interested to see exactly how they finish that. As we said, it probably is not really what Wells's final vision would have been, but who knows? This is a movie that was shot over a period of years in the mid-'70s, and just, never got finished. And then Welles died in the mid 80s. And so that is on Netflix and available to everybody. So I think that's probably how we're going to do it is after this, go to Citizen Kane, then The Other Side of the Wind. Oh yeah, I'm looking up here on the copyright status now. Yeah, part of it has to do with the copyright laws of the UK. Copyright protected his dramatic works until 70 years after the end of the year in which that last principal, whoever was the last principal author, died. So the film, but in the U.S., the film lapsed into the public domain for a while when the copyright was not reviewed. In 1996, Uruguay Round Agreements Act restored the film's U.S. copyright protection. And that thing that you said, yeah, Studio Canal. Criterion Collection released a digitally divorced. Okay, so after Criterion released something in 2008, Lionsgate did a Blu-ray in 2010.
Yeah, that one's pretty cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, under current U.S. copyright law, The Third Man remains under copyright until January 1st, 2045. So this is another example. I know there's a few others of films that briefly were in the public domain and once again are not. As I said before, The Stranger has always been in the public domain, which is one of the reasons why it's so easy to watch. You can watch it pretty much anywhere, and yeah, it's always funny. It seems so weird, today to think of like people not renewing copyright, like with something like Night of the Living Dead isn't that public domain?
Still, yeah.
Yeah, so, and we think of it such a big, important movie, but
what a mistake, Just imagine how much money that they lost.
I know, and it could have spared us so many of those movies that used like Living Dead in the title.
Oh,
I mean, there still would have been a lot of shitty movies anyway, but there's just so many. There's like dozens of movies using like Living Dead or whatever in the title.
I can think of like 10 movies that have Night of the Living Dead playing on television in the film, just because they can,
Yeah, I think so. Oh, this is funny. So how I was talking about in the other episode that often in like at least animated and stuff, when they're doing Orson Welles, they have that character, they have that voice actor. What's his name, LaMarche or whatever his name is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also the voice of the Brain and Pinky and the Brain. There's an actual episode of Pinky and the Brain that does a spoof of this movie called The Third House, where of course the Brain is in the Harry Lime role. Because again, anytime you're going to do like an Orson Welles thing, it's LaMarche doing the voice. Pretty funny. But yeah, this movie actually spawned sequels in not the film realm, but they actually made a radio show called, what is it, The Lives of Harry Lime.
Right.
Which I think Welles actually did participate in.
Mm-hmm.
Also known as The Adventures of Harry Lime. And he reprised the role, which, yeah, it works obviously as a prequel because Lime gets killed in this movie. So it works as a prequel, I guess, talking about some of the stuff he did in Vienna beforehand.
Wasn't that with the BBC? Somehow like a BBC radio?
It must have been, because it was in England. But,
I came across that when I was trying to find this film to watch.
Yeah. Again, it's interesting that Welles was able to make such an impact at different levels of media, because he started out doing theater, and after that he did radio and then cinema, and then he actually did some more radio. So there's not too many artists that can say they made significant contributions to 3 different platforms like that.
It's like, I mean, when you're talking about the mainstream, what would you say that he's remembered most for? Like, would it be Citizen Kane, or would it be like War of the Worlds or something?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a tie between those two, really.
Because that like blew my mind when I heard about that. When I was a kid, I was like, wow. So people thought like aliens were attacking.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I know. as I pointed out, that has been really exaggerated and overstated in popular media, but it is true that it did cause kind of a big ripple in at least that New Jersey area. Like sometimes it's presented as if like it threw the whole like country into chaos or something. Well, no, it was, but it did cause a stir, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was only like local in New Jersey.
Yeah, but still, there were several thousand people that were exposed to it, and it actually led to quite a few people calling the cops and calling in different places and stuff who were quite upset.
What are the cops going to do?
I don't know. Arrest Pat Marshall.
Radio. They're attacking.
Yeah.
Is that still the symbol for telephone? Or would it be like this now?
Yeah, that's true.
The children remember what telephones look like?
Remember what dial tone sounds like? But yeah, we talked before also too about how in like the 60s he became friends with some of the younger up and coming the new generation of directors when we talked about the new wave. And one of his better friends was Peter Bogdanovich. I'm finding here that in 1967 he did an interview with Peter Bogdanovich talking about the film, and they were talking about the issue or sort of the rumors that like this was a film he kind of like secretly directed instead of Carol. And in this particular interview, he denies it. He says no, it was Carol's picture, very much so. So I think that puts that idea to bed.
Yeah, I think Bogdanovich was one of the big reasons why some of this stuff has actually come out.
Yeah, he championed it a lot.
He was, yeah. I've heard him talk about Orson Welles quite a bit on a few different things. Like even in the documentary about him, he talks about Orson Welles quite a bit.
Yeah, his connection to people like Bogdanovich is one of the reasons why he finally started getting actually some recognition and respect over here. Because as we said, through about like the 40s and 50s at least, and into the 60s, Welles was not considered the cinematic genius that he kind of is now, although he was kind of in Europe, where he was spending most of his time. So he's an example sort of an American artist that was actually much more appreciated outside his own country for most of his life and career. But I'm trying to look at the sequence here, trying to remember what he would do right after this. This is 40, 49. Okay, so I guess the next thing that he would at least embark on to direct himself was that version of The Tragedy of Othello. But that wouldn't be really next, because that came out in 1952. But as we said, that was actually shot through over at least 3 or 4 years, on and off, leading to some really weird continuity parts where, like, sometimes a scene, like, halfway through it, they stopped and then picked it up, like, 2 or 3 years later. I did watch a little bit of it back in January before I was back in Halifax, because I managed to tape it, but I didn't have time to watch the whole thing. And he's very good in it. I mean, people can say whatever you want about a white person playing Othello, but I mean, that's how it went a lot of the time back in the day. And he does a really great job. But that's, again, what's sort of so startling about the guy is that he was such a talent as a director and an actor. And yes, there are people that have done both. And I remember, I think after the show, somebody had brought up like Clint Eastwood as kind of a comparison as somebody that, you know, was a very successful actor and filmmaker. And yeah, and I like Clint Eastwood and all, but I just don't think he's half the actor that Orson Welles was.
That is a good comparison. Yeah, I would say that's a good comparison. Who kind of transitioned into more, well, I mean, I guess even his newest movie he's starring in, so.
Yeah. See, in Orson Welles, it was never really a transition, though. He was just everything all at once, which is kind of what amazes me. He wasn't like, okay, I was like a big famous actor, and now I'm so, you know, successful that I'm allowed to direct, and I'm going to direct some stuff now. It didn't work that way for him.
Right.
He had that amazing seminal opportunity to do that film Citizen Kane, which was something that he, wrote, directed, produced, and starred in, which is kind of crazy to think about. People don't usually get that kind of leeway. And then ever since then, he was just sort of seen as, both. It seemed like principally he wanted to direct and produce films. But I mean, he was still a really good actor and he delivered a lot of interesting and even important and memorable performances well into life as he got older.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he really ever left acting totally behind. It seemed to me that his main priority was directing, but it's not like he discarded acting because of that. Although, again, as pointed out, for this film, even though obviously he was very professional, did a great job on it, his principal motivation for acting in this movie was just so he could make money because he wanted to use it to finance making more films. But yeah, no, Eastwood's not a bad comparison as far as some of that surface stuff goes. But I mean, I don't know, it's still pretty difficult. And I've just never thought that Eastwood was a very versatile actor.
Yeah, he's done some decent stuff. I was thinking of like David Bowie.
He's interesting. I mean, obviously he's principally a musician,
right?
But he did have those other.
But I guess he wasn't like that successful as an actor, so maybe not a good example.
No.
Trying to not many, that is for sure, that can, act as well as get behind the camera and do both at the same time, continuously.
That's what I mean. And the fact that for decades he was doing both at the same time, and also as a producer and writer.
Because I mean, there's plenty of actors that stopped acting and then turned in, directing.
Yeah, like
almost like a Ben Affleck, like he's done some pretty good films, directed some good films.
Yeah, directed some okay films. Man, I just saw him in that Netflix movie, and man, is he ever not trying in that. I forget what it's called. Triple Frontier.
Oh, really?
I would say do not bother with that movie.
Haven't heard of it. I'm not a particularly big fan of his or anything.
Yeah, he's in it, but he's not that important. It's like a Narcos type movie. It's about like these guys. I think some of them were ex-soldiers and stuff that decide to like get together to try to rob this Mexican drug kingpin. And it's basically about them trying to rob him and then get away with it and stuff. And it's so bland and, like nobody cares. I guess what's notable about it is besides Ben Affleck, there's a few other fairly like hip actors, like Oscar Isaacs is in there and somebody else. Like I've read a few reviews that were, I think, pretty sure were written by like women that say like the best thing about the movie is just like how like good looking the guys are in the movie. I'm like, okay, that's fair.
Sure.
Why not? We got movies full of beautiful actresses, so eye candy for the women too, sure. But yeah, so the movie, yeah. No, it just came out on Netflix a few weeks ago. It's like, a Netflix original movie and kind of a big deal because Ben Affleck's in it, but it's not bad. It's just, it's just completely, bland and not memorable or interesting really in any way.
Definitely skip that one.
That is not directed by Affleck. I have no idea who directed.
I think I almost like his directed films more than the films he stars in.
I have huge problems with Argo. I mean, I know I'm being an uppity Canadian about it, but I can't help it. I mean, it matters. It matters.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Argo.
Yeah. So, well, what else has he directed?
What's the heist movie? The
Town.
The Town. I thought that was good, and the one that stars Casey.
Oh, he did Gone Girl, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Gone Girl. Yeah, that's a really good one. That's not the one I'm thinking of, though.
I like both Gone Girl and The Town, but I think they're both overrated. Especially Gone Girl. I think I've talked about this before. The only thing that bothers me about The Town is I just don't buy it. Like, I don't believe that this, like, Boston guy who, was used to be a hockey player and, got injured and flamed out and has just been bouncing around, is like able to plan and pull off these really, really like, clever heists. Like, I just don't buy it. Like him and who is it, Jeremy Renner? They're like planning it out in their kitchen. I'm like, who are these guys? Like, I don't understand like why they should be able to do this. Like, they don't have any sort of background that suggests they can. Because sometimes you'll see movies where like there's like some sort of like high tech heist going on, and the guys are really slick and they have all this great gear, and you kind of buy. You're like, oh, okay, it's like this a really specialized group. Maybe some of them used to be like, I don't know, be like Black Ops or something like that. But these are just two guys in Boston, and yet they're pulling off these really elaborate heists. Like I don't know. I had a lot of trouble with that. Still like the movie.
Gone Baby Gone's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, not Gone Girl. That's what I meant when I said Gone Girl. I meant Gone Baby Gone.
He did Gone Girl too, though.
Yeah, he didn't direct it though.
He didn't? I think he did.
Oh, did he? No, he didn't. You know how I remember that? Because he got in fights with the director because he wouldn't wear the Yankees cap.
Oh, because he's a Boston guy. Yeah, I respect that.
Yeah, but you're an actor. You have to.
Because fuck the Yankees. David Fincher did that. That's right.
Yeah, he compromised and wore a Mets hat. That's my favorite baseball team, based on nothing.
Yeah.
I've got a Mets hat around here somewhere.
Yeah. Red Sox, Yankees, that's serious stuff up there.
Yeah, I know. I'm a sports guy. I agree. But I still think for a movie, when you're being paid millions of dollars, you can put a hat on to play a character.
Sure. But, I mean, he's Ben Affleck. He's got some clout.
I know, but that's just being an asshole about it. Just like when he got that guy fired from that show because he was dating Jennifer Garner. I mean, that's real asshole stuff to do. What was that show that Jennifer Garner was on?
Not Alias.
Yeah, Alias. So Michael Vartan was on Alias.
Oh, shit. I didn't know about that.
Ben Affleck threw his weight around to get him fired, because he didn't like Michael Vartan. They weren't, doing anything, but he's like he was a romantic lead
for years and years.
Yeah, Ben Affleck. Well before Ben Affleck started dating her, right? But once they started dating, Ben Affleck used his Ben Affleck clout and got him off. And I think that's a real asshole thing to do.
Yeah.
And also super unprofessional. Again, they're actors. Who cares? Let them act. So, yeah. I mean, Ben Affleck, I think, is mostly a nice guy. But again, he's in that stratosphere of being so famous and stuff that he thinks certain things, normal life and rules don't apply to him. And he can just do stuff. And that pisses me off. Because I know he's a nice guy, and I know he's given to charities and stuff like that, and done nice things for normal people, and I respect all that. But
I think it's normal to get a pretty big ego about yourself when you get to be that big.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't blame him for not turning down being Batman, but I kind of want to. I kind of want to. If nobody else would stop the madness, he could have. At least he stopped it now by walking away. Because that's
he did walk away though. So.
Yeah, but he didn't walk away because he said, "Let's face it, I'm a lousy Batman."
Right.
That's not why he walked away.
Yeah, I mean, as much stuff as I hated about that movie, his performance wasn't necessarily one of them.
It's not his performance. It's just that it's him. I've done this a million times. Like saying, all I see is Ben Affleck. I don't see Bruce Wayne. I see Ben Affleck. That's all I can see. I can't unsee it. I think he's a fine actor who's given good performance and stuff. I just think, super miscast. That's all.
I agree with that. But I mean, I have that problem all the time, when they cast big actors in these roles, like, every like Marvel movie that comes out, that they cast some known actor in the role, that's always distracting for me. Like, fuck Don Cheadle, Don Cheadle's in fucking Iron Man. It's Don Cheadle, man. Come on.
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't think that much about Don Cheadle. I think Don Cheadle is miscast because I know the character Rhodes, and he's way too like skinny, and Rhodes is supposed to be a big, burly, really military guy.
Terrence Howard looks more like the actual guy from the comics, right?
He does, but Terrence Howard also has that high voice, so that doesn't work for me either. If I'm going to be really picky, I don't think either of them are particularly good as War Machine. But at the same time, I have to say, I really think that Chris Evans, and speaking of a big star, what's his name? Robert Downey Jr. To me, I'm not distracted. I think they play the characters great. Like, they are the roles really well. So I'm not distracted at all by that. To me, Like Robert Downey Jr. is a great Tony Stark. He's a really, really, really good Tony Stark. Like he's so much like what I pictured for years. So it doesn't distract me. I think, yeah, that's good.
I mean, Chris Evans. I mean, I knew who Chris Evans was before he was Captain America, but I would say most people didn't. You know, but
probably the worst part was that he was Johnny Storm first.
Right.
The good news about him is the older he gets, the better it works. Unfortunately, speaking of that, all those contracts are up soon. Like after this last Avengers movie, like who knows what's going to happen because a lot of these actors might be, leaving, which I'm fine with. Just recast.
I know Scarlett Johansson's probably ready to get out of that contract.
Fine with me. Again, I don't mind.
See, that's another distracting casting choice, you know?
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. And like I said, she doesn't have to be in absolutely everything. It's stupid.
I don't know why. Like, at least, I know you had problems with Black Panther, but at least the guy cast as, Black Panther is not like a guy I've seen all over the place, And
I like him fine. I think he's good. I just didn't particularly like some of the script of Black Panther. I like the character. I liked him in his first appearance when he was in Captain America 3. I thought, yeah, he's a good Black Panther.
It's like, fuck. I mean,
no issues with the casting there.
I mean, Mark Ruffalo, I mean, like every person is someone I know, their full body of work, and I've seen them in tons of things.
That's kind of unavoidable.
Well, I mean, you don't cast like a fucking superstar, in your movie. It doesn't. I don't think they have any faith that the movie is going to be successful without.
I know, and that is annoying because you should be more concerned about casting the character properly so that you're open to an unknown, because maybe there's an unknown that's perfect. Maybe there's an unknown that can nail it, but you're like, oh, there's all this pressure from the studio to like they give us this list of names and we have to go with that, because that's what I think of, like stuff like, okay. My favorite character is Moon Knight, right? I have no idea if Moon Knight will ever get a movie. It seems like he probably will. That's what I mean, right? But it's not even that. My point is this. Let's say it's up to me. Let's say I get to cast Moon Knight. Dream come true. It would have to be an unknown, because I can't think of a single known, because I can't think of anybody. I can't think of anybody. So it would have to be an unknown. It would have to be. I'm not saying there's no one that can do it. Absolutely there's someone that can do it. But he's not among those like big known stars at all. He's just not for me. He's a super complicated and difficult character to pull off.
Trying to get a shot of the face here. Does he ever take the mask off?
Oh yeah. I mean, he looks like a guy. The way all these comic book heroes do, right? He looks like a guy. And his hair color is not really that important. His hair is usually kind of like a reddish brown.
Tom Hardy.
It's too short.
I'm just saying, it's like that's the choices. There's like, okay, it's either going to be like Brad Pitt, Tom Hardy, or fucking George Clooney. Okay, that's our choices.
Marky Mark's also too short.
But I don't know. I guess that's one positive thing. I haven't seen Captain Marvel yet, but. I mean, I don't necessarily like Brie Larson or anything, but at least she wasn't.
Have any preconceptions about the character.
Right. But I mean, at least she wasn't like a huge known, blonde bombshell actress, which is what you kind of expect to be cast in that role.
She's pretty good. She's pretty good. Again, actually, it's not a complaint exactly, because I don't mind, but it's kind of the same thing I said about War Machine, because actually Carol Danvers is military too, and Brie doesn't really come off that military to me.
Right. Which
is not a big deal. I don't care. But yeah, Carol Danvers is like it's always been reflected in her character that she was, before she was a big superhero flying around, she was military. She, and she lived her life that way. And, now she's actually a team leader and she kind of runs the team that way and stuff. And people often reference it. So it's not like it's something that I'm just fixating on. It's part of her character. It's an ongoing thing. And I don't really get that sense from Brie Larson, but at the same time, I don't care that much. I thought it was really, really good. I mean,
like Blake Lively or some shit. That's who I would expect them, someone like that to cast, So I can respect that casting choice, or like Jennifer Lawrence. I know she's already in the X-Men movies, but
yeah, I know. Jennifer Lawrence would have been a terrible choice.
I just searched like popular blonde actresses, and I'm looking.
Sure. Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't make it Emma Stone.
Yeah, I guess she is blonde now, isn't she?
Well, I mean, they can at least make her blonde if they want to. Again, I got nothing against Emma Stone, but man, would that be terrible. I mean, she was bad enough as Gwen Stacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's bad casting for a lot of that stuff.
No, Brie Larson's pretty good. And again, I mean, it's not like, I fixate on a lot of these characters. I don't fixate huge on Carol Danvers. I like her. She's cool. She's good to have around. They do something in that movie to the dynamic of the Kree-Skrull war that I really don't like. I'll say
Really?
that. Yeah, it's a spoiler, so I will not give it away. But which is kind of too bad because they do such a great job of representing both races, like the Kree and the Skrull. They look great. They sound great. Like, they really pay attention. They're wearing the clothes that they wear. It's not like some weird new interpretation that they want to do. They're paying attention and they're doing it the right way. But yeah, they do something that kind of changes the dynamic of the conflict that I do not agree with. That is certainly not in the comics. But I mean, I kind of understand why they did it, but I don't know. That's my main problem with the movie. So I can't really get into it without being big spoilers, and I don't want to spoil to you or audience, considering that's a movie that's still in theaters.
It's, I was really turned off by just the hype around it, but I do want to see it.
I'm tired of people treating it like it's like the first time there's been a female superhero. Yes, I get it. It's the Marvel U's first. Within the Marvel U, MCU, or whatever you want to call it, this Marvel Cinematic Universe, yes, this is the first movie starring a female character. Sure, that's significant, but let's not lose our minds over it and act like there haven't been female superheroes before or anything like that and stuff. And I mean, to the movie's credit, the movie's not like trying to make a point of it. The movie's not like, oh, she's a girl kicking ass, and it's not full of like a bunch of lines about how she's like can do this. It's not shoving any of that in your face.
Mm-hmm.
What it shoves in your face is the '90s, and I don't mind that because I'm a '90s guy, right? So So yeah, they shove the '90s stuff in your face pretty hard, but I like it. I enjoy all of that.
I'm sure that people complain about that.
I guess. Well, people are always going to complain about things. It's not like it's a flawless movie. There's things to complain about, I guess, and that's the world we live in. But I am mostly happy with it. Mostly, I'm just glad that this is the last time. The next thing will be the big one. It'll be Avengers Endgame, which obviously she's going to be in.
Well, she's the reason why it's going to be an alternate reality, right? I mean, it has to be.
I don't know. I will say this has nothing to do with that exactly, but Stan Lee's cameo in the movie, if you think about it, you can just laugh at it, but if you think about it, it suggests multiple realities too, which is pretty funny. It's fairly meta. I won't give that away either. You'll definitely appreciate it. You'll know what I mean you'll appreciate it.
So it's his last one, huh?
I don't know. They did a nice thing for the intro. You know how the last couple years for the intro, they have that thing where they like instead of flipping the pages, they just have that. I don't know what it is. It's like the still photography where it shows all the different characters layered on each other, from each movie. In this one, for the intro, it's all of Stan's.
That's cool.
Nice. And then it says, "Thank you, Stan," which is nice.
And then Bill Maher comes in and shits all over everything.
Bill Maher's like, "You're a bunch of children."
Oh. I mean, apparently Bill Maher didn't see how much these movies gross, man. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the majority of the world is going to watch this fucking movie.
Yeah. Well, like, part of his line was, like, he said, like, oh, the passing of a guy that inspired you to do what? Watch a movie? I don't know. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? It has nothing to do with movies. It inspired, like, several generations of creative artists. People that were like, hey, maybe I can draw, or maybe I can write, and stuff like that. Like, thousands of people.
Well, I mean, you could say without Stan Lee, comics may not have gone very far at all. I mean, there's a lot of things you could say, like,
Because not just because of his creative output, but because of, what he did just as a voice for him. He was the pitch man. He was the person that was being the face and getting out there and saying that, I mean, obviously his job was to hawk Marvel, but in a way, he represented the whole medium. It's like comic books aren't, they're fun, they're exciting, get into them. He was all about that. He never turned down an interview, I can tell you that much. And, comics kind of needed that. They needed a pitch man. They needed somebody to get up here and say, check this out.
Especially when they were saying like, this is why kids are bad. Kids are bad
Yeah.
because of comics.
And they believed it, man, and it had real repercussions for years.
Oh, no.
I mean, it really crushed the industry. I mean, suddenly the Joker couldn't kill people anymore. You couldn't even have monsters. Like in the 50s, you couldn't even have monsters.
Wow.
You couldn't have certain words. Like, it was insane.
The words I understand. I mean, why did?
Well, I mean, you understand, but not all of them. Like, for instance, you couldn't even say a monster word. You couldn't use the word vampire in a comic. So you couldn't have a character say, like, it sucked the blood out like a vampire. You couldn't have them say that, let alone draw an actual vampire on the page. Like, so yeah, like, there were a ton of words you couldn't say. It's not just like the normal ones you'd expect. There were just a ton of them.
Monster, so like that's pretty much anything, right? Anything that's not just like a human.
Yeah,
with a mask on.
That's why in the early 70s, when they relaxed it and allowed it, that's why if you're looking up some of these characters, like, why did these all come out at once? They all came out at once because they all were finally allowed to come back after being banned for 15 years.
Wow.
So that's why, like, suddenly in the early 70s, both Marvel and DC had all these, like, monster comics come out, like Tomb of Dracula, Swamp Thing, eventually what would become Ghost Rider, all that stuff. That all came out in the same span a couple years, because for years they just weren't allowed.
So was Hulk considered a monster?
I guess not.
Because he was out before.
He was already around. Because he was already around. Oh no, this was before. This was before the Hulk. I mean, this would have been the mid 50s. The Hulk came out in 1961.
Right, but I mean, you said the 70s is when they laxed.
Well, yeah, I guess on the more classic, where you could finally have like vampire, werewolf, that kind of thing, zombie. There were no vampires, werewolves, and zombies from like the 50s through the 60s. It wasn't until the early 70s that they started to, again, loosen it.
I don't want to live in a world where you can't have vampires, zombies, and werewolves in comics.
Yeah, that world did exist for about, like I said, about 15 years.
Stupid.
And again, and also took the legs out from various already established characters like the Joker. That's why the Joker, who had started out as this sinister guy that did murder people, turned into this silly clown in the 50s and early 60s that just would announce his crimes and cause a nuisance. He wouldn't even put people in danger or jeopardy. He would just show up and like cause a nuisance and make some jokes, and then Batman and Robin would lock him up. A lot of people think that's how the Joker started out. That's not how the Joker started out. His very first appearance in 1939, he was murdering people. It was that bit where he would like come on the radio and say at midnight, this guy's going to die. And then it happened. That was his very first appearance.
Wow.
And, in the 40s and stuff, you had him using his Joker gas on people and them, laughing themselves to death.
Mm-hmm.
So that did exist in the Golden Age. It wasn't until the 50s that they clamped down and were like, no, we can't have that. And, nearly ruined a lot of comics. Superheroes in general were mostly dead in the 50s. That wasn't all code related. Some of it was, post-World War II fatigue.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this new Joker film?
I don't even know what's going to happen. I keep finding out like all this stuff that's holding it back. So.
Oh, I thought it was in production.
Hold on. I was reading something today.
I don't understand, why are they doing standalone villain films?
I don't know what's to be gained from that.
I mean, they did a Venom, which they just want to cash in on the name Venom because they can.
And yet Venom works best. I mean, Venom is Spider-Man, and yet I don't get it at all.
That Venom film was probably better than it had any right to be.
So I've heard. Yeah,
I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it.
I'll eventually see it, but I certainly wasn't going to go support a movie where he doesn't even have a spider on his chest. I mean, that's ridiculous. I just can't equate idea. So let's hear. Okay. Yeah, they're saying that. Let's see. At first, when this was first announced, the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie, that it was going to be produced by Martin Scorsese. Then Scorsese dropped out. Then they said, "Yeah, we're definitely happening," but we lost him. Let's see. Uh, Several rewrites, which is no big deal. Rewrites happen all the time. Now the Joker movie is going to be directed by Todd Phillips, who's the guy that directed The Hangover.
Oh God Almighty, really? It's got someone
Um,
called Zazzy Beats in there. What the hell is that? What's a Zazzy Beats?
I do not know.
I mean, that's the. Oh, she was Domino in Deadpool too. Okay,
Oh, she's cool.
yeah.
Then there was talk about Baldwin being in there, then he dropped out.
De Niro's still attached, I think. I mean,
And there was
pretty.
some. Then they had some thing about the extras getting locked in a subway car. People forgot about a bunch of extras and left them there all day.
That's no good.
So yeah, so I guess it's still going forward, but I guess like a lot of movies, there have been some problems. I guess so. Maybe sometimes a clickbait works to make it sound like the movie's going off the rails, but lots of movies face challenges.
Joaquin Phoenix is the only actor to play the Joker that hasn't won an Oscar. That kind of sucks.
Maybe he'll win one. I mean, honestly, he might have. I mean, I can't remember who won Best Supporting Actor in 2000, and I think this movie's super overrated. But Gladiator came out in 2000, and his performance in that is really good. He's the weird bad guy emperor.
That's the first thing
Like
I
he's
remember
like the
seeing
best.
him in.
He's like the best thing about that movie. Like everybody lost their minds over that movie, and I think it's a pretty good movie. I don't think it's great or anything. It's a little over. I think it's a little over the top, but I still do like the movie. But to me, his performance is like the best thing, and he didn't. I don't. He might have gotten nominated, but obviously he didn't win
Oh man, I guess he won
for Best Supporting Actor.
Best Actor.
Oh, Best Actor in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wasn't it? What's his name? Wasn't it Russell Crowe?
Nope.
Oh, good. Then I'm happy. Who was
Nope.
it?
You won't be happy.
Oh.
Kevin Spacey for American Beauty.
Yeah. No, I'm not happy.
What about Best Actress?
I don't know. Probably the other one from American Beauty. Probably American Beauty swept the Oscars.
It did win the Best Director.
I know one Best Director.
Hilary Swank for Boys Don't Cry. Another one of your favorites.
Well, as I've said about a lot of movies that are based on real life, it's problematic.
Michael Caine won for Cider House Rules, Best Supporting Actor.
I've still never seen that.
Me either.
I know what it is, and I know that Tobey Maguire's in there. I know it has some weird stuff. It seems like the type of movie I'd be into. I just never saw it. Maybe someday.
So I watched Gladiator, and I said, "Oh, Joaquin, I don't know who this guy is." And then I looked him up, and I said, "Oh, that's fucking Leaf. I know exactly who that is. I know Leaf."
Yeah. I like how he changed his name to try to be different, because they all had names like that, right? Like River and Sun and stuff like that.
You really think it would have made a difference?
No.
I mean, it sounds more pretentious for sure.
I mean, he just came from a super hippy-dippy family.
Yeah.
They were like hardcore.
I've never understood a lot of name changes. And
well, I can understand kind of being embarrassed about being named Leaf, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he should have been, but I'm saying I can understand. Yeah, like I said, he came from a family with like River and Sun and all these things. And he's like, I don't want to be part of a set. Like, I want to be individual. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess River sounds cooler.
Yeah. I miss you, River. You could have had a great career. You probably could have been somebody good in a comic book movie. Yeah. Maybe you would have grown up to be Moon Knight. I doubt it. No, you'd be too old by now.
How old would he be now? Yeah. Be too old to play
he'd be in his late 40s by now, I guess.
Yeah.
Batman. Might even be 50. But yeah, I always wonder about certain things like that. I always think there were a few like key like movies from like the late '90s, early 2000s where I think somebody like him would have been so good, or somebody. As we talked about how, I mean, I really do think Keanu Reeves is really cool in The Matrix, but I think how much cooler would it have been if it was Brandon Lee like they originally wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Love Brandon Lee.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine. I'd like, yeah, River Phoenix, man. Like everything he did was good. Like I've gone back
Yeah,
and watched like virtually everything he's ever done. Like Running on
yeah.
Empty is great.
And he's always, and he's always playing a fairly different
Yeah.
character. He's not just playing like the same guy over and over again. He's got characters that have like memorable traits that separate them from each
Mm-hmm.
other.
Of course,
Mm.
Stand By Me is great.
Yeah, I like, and at the same time, Mosquito Coast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We might do that one on the show because I like it so much, and it's one of the ones that I feel like gets overlooked. So I'd like to talk about it. So it's possible future episode. Maybe we'll do Mosquito Coast because I
Cool.
really like that. Plus, also, I think it's a good example of like Harrison Ford finally like playing kind of a dense type, which I think is one of the reasons why it failed at the box office. I think it confused people because people throughout the '80s had seen Harrison Ford as this rising like good guy action star that everybody like loved and wanted to hang out with. And in Mosquito Coast, he's this intellectual, but he's also uh, basically a jerk who thinks he knows better than everybody. And I think that threw audiences. They were like, Harrison Ford shouldn't play an unlikable guy. But it's a cool performance too. I love at the beginning of the movie when he's arguing with Jason Alexander about something made in Japan or something. Jason Alexander's at like the hardware store. He's like the hardware store clerk. And he's like, get me that tape or whatever. It's like that. And he reasons like, made in Japan. He's like, get me something made in USA. He's like, we don't have any. He's like, this is why this country's going down the tube. We don't make things and stuff. Jason Alexander's like, you're crazy. Get out of my store. I don't know. I just love the idea of Harrison Ford and Jason Alexander actually having a scene together. Most people aren't really aware of that, but it happened.
Putting Mosquito Coast on the list.
Yeah, I have the novel of that too. It's
really?
novel. Yeah, the movie's very close to the novel. They do a really good job.
Another one I would like to do.
He dated the girl that was in that. She has a stupid name, isn't it? Like Martha Plimpton or something like that. Man, I hate that name. What an awful name.
That is a terrible name. She's from a very famous family too.
Oh yeah.
But another film I was thinking about wanting to do when you're talking about the school shooting stuff is the Gus Van Sant film.
Elephant?
Elephant, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
I'm not going to be satisfied until we do every Gus Van Sant movie on here. We've done two already.
Fair enough. I like Elephant. I think Elephant's worth discussing. It has a lot of interesting things going on. I think it was a really bold movie to make at the time too.
Mm-hmm. Very bold choices in there too, which I really like the way they went with stuff.
I'm sure that movie probably upset a lot of people.
I think it probably did. Yeah, that's. See, that was done. Was that done after Columbine? What year was Columbine?
99. So this is about 3 or 4 years after.
Well, like 2003 or so.
That's what I'm thinking. Usually I'm rock solid on dates. This one I'm a little hazy on. I want to say 2003.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is like well in the school shooting era. So yeah. It definitely rocks some boats.
Before we all got super used to it. Because nowadays we're kind of used to it. But like in the early 2000s, it was really the hot button issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like it still kind of should be in a way, but now there's so many other shootings going on and stuff too. There's so much other stuff to pay attention to. It's like
it seemed like every other day there was another school shooting.
Yeah.
Now it's almost like school shooting. Okay, who cares?
Yeah, okay, who cares? Now we got temple and mosque shootings and concert shootings.
Keith Carradine is her dad, Martha Plimpton.
Oh, okay.
So she
I
was.
always get Keith Carradine. This is an odd thing, but I always get Keith Carradine mixed up with Peter Coyote.
Yeah, they do look similar.
And they always seem to like dress and act similar and stuff too. Like it's Peter Coyote who is the guy that's chasing E.T. in E.T., who you mostly for most of the movie only see like from the belt buckle before they show the rest of him. Looks so much like Keith Carradine. Like he could have easily doubled for him at that role.
But all of like the other Carradines, like it's like a huge web of like famous people and popular actors and actresses.
David was still the most famous, wasn't he?
Well, maybe not more so than John, but
How long ago was John's era though?
oh fuck, a long time ago.
Yeah. See, I know that he's somebody, but I don't actually know what he did. But yeah, another big sprawling acting family.
I mean, they're still active. Like, there's one called Ever. I don't remember whose kid that is, but she's like up and coming, like big time actress.
Oh yeah.
Ever Carradine, and maybe one of David's like grandkids or something. There's so damn many of them, I lose track. Because you've got Keith, and you've got the one that was in Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh yeah, that is.
And then David. I don't know that they're all three full blood brothers, but they're John's sons. So. I went down this rabbit hole when I was looking at something else not too long ago.
Oh, yeah.
I think I was looking up whoever Carradine was. She was like she may have been one of the big people behind that fire fraud thing.
Oh, the concert,
the festival thing. Yeah.
That's interesting. Never would have associated with somebody like her. Well, not like her. I don't know her, but I mean her background or whatever.
I think she was one of the. No, I saw her in a movie or something. She was in *Handmaid's Tale*. She was in *Runaways*. *Goliath*. That's what I saw her on. I watched that show recently.
I know the title, but I don't know it.
Billy Bob Thornton.
I've heard it's pretty weird.
The first season I thought was really good. I haven't seen the second. I heard it falls off pretty hard.
Oh,
didn't want to devote the time to it. But have you seen anything else lately that you enjoyed?
Lately, I don't know why stuff like this goes out of my head. Because I know I've definitely probably seen something lately. Hold on.
I saw that Holmes and Watson the other night. That was pretty funny.
What's funny is back around Christmas when it was coming out, I thought maybe that would be a good thing to go see. And then I read that people were like walking out of it in droves.
Yeah, I could totally see that. These people don't understand period comedies. I mean, some of it reminded me of like Monty Python type stuff, like in the Holy Grail, just like, I don't know, just real obscure things that, a lot of people wouldn't get. The mainstream audience probably wouldn't. You have to be like kind of like a nerd.
A little better about it, because from what I was reading, people were just saying like it's embarrassingly awful. Like,
no, I wouldn't say that at all. Because
I mean, me, I'm usually pretty wary about comedies that come out now because most are so good. That one I was actually thinking, why not? They're good together, those two, and I think it could be funny doing a Sherlock Holmes thing. Why not? And then, just around the time I was reading all this stuff, and where people were like walking out, like just saying like this is one of the worst movies in like decades. I was like, wow, really? And then I just completely forgot it existed.
It's got a 3.5 out of 10 on IMDb. It's not doing too great. Wow.
Yeah, like people have come down hard on it. And I mean, as I've said, like I don't try to be too influenced by critics and reviews and stuff like that. But usually when something is either really strong one way or the other, you do kind of have to pay attention. So I just thought, they can't all be wrong. So I don't know.
I thought it was okay. I mean, not as good as some of their previous films, but
Yeah.
I'm a
I
fan of
watched
those guys. So as long as they're together, man, I'm gonna be on board.
I watched Mom and Dad.
Oh, did you?
You know, it's okay. It
Yeah.
has some certainly memorable things happening in it. I can't remember what the opening reminded me of something with like the way the music went. And I guess it was kind of like a Tarantino type thing
Mm-hmm.
almost, the way the opening worked. And I like that kind of more than the rest of the movie. It's fun though, you know, it's funny and it's nice
Yeah.
that they went there, right? Because I've
Yeah.
always bitched about how like, oh, we can't have, you know, children in danger or anything bad
Yeah.
happen. And this movie's all about like their own parents are trying to kill
Right.
them. You know, it's just pretty amusing. You know, you've got like Nick Cage ranting and raving because that's his main skill.
Yeah, sure. Being himself.
You know, it's a pretty short movie. It's, you know, maybe an hour, 20 minutes, so it's quick and painless. So it's okay.
I liked
That,
when
oh yeah,
when
go ahead.
I was gonna say I liked when Lance Henderson was the dad, and he was trying to kill his son.
Yeah, that's like the best part of the movie, right?
Yeah.
Is like they finally have them like cornered and stuff, and then the doorbell rings. It's like, what's happening here? It's like it's his own parents, and they're here to kill them. Yeah, it is pretty funny. Yeah. I am getting a little tired though of movies that have like a montage of like people in dangerous situations, like cobbling together household stuff. Like it's been done to death.
Sure.
So,
That has been
you know,
done
you
to
see the
death.
daughter, you know, ringing up the door. I mean, I get it; it's part of the plot, so I can't like say it doesn't fit the movie. I'm just saying like it just seems to happen in so many movies. It's just like, okay, here's our normal everyday character. Suddenly, they're an ingenious badass that knows some way to like you know fight people off or protect themselves.
You know, another really stupid thing they did. They were like, okay, how can we kill the kids in the basement? Let's fill it full of fucking like natural gas or whatever the hell they pump down in there. Like,
Yeah.
surely that's not going to backfire on us at all by exploding.
Yeah. Well, I figured like part of it was like they're just whatever it is that makes it was never established, was it?
Yeah,
What
no, I don't think
happened?
so.
Yeah, but whatever it is that makes people want to kill their kids, like it also like pretty much takes away like rational thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like whatever kills them quickest, you know, whatever's the fastest, most efficient way. So I kind of let that slide. I was just like, yeah, okay, they're not thinking clearly. It's just they just have this impulse. It's like kill them, gotta kill them. So I was fine with that. I watched Memories of Murder, which is really good. Which is that Korean crime drama that's loosely based on you know the real serial killings in South Korea in the late 80s and early 90s.
Okay.
That's on
yeah.
on Prime. It says it's like from like 2017 or something. It's from 2003, but they have it like mislabeled. But anyway, it was one I read about for many years. It's really good. It's by the you know the director.
Yeah, I've seen this. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good like crime drama because of how realistic it is. It's super depressing, but you know it makes
a lot
sense.
of those are, yeah.
Yeah, but I really liked it. It was really well done.
Oh yeah, that's the guy that did Snowpiercer and The Host.
Yeah, exactly. This is like his first big movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I watched that the other day. I really enjoyed it.
Did you ever see Snowpiercer?
Still haven't seen it, even though it's right there. I haven't seen that or Train to Busan, even though they're both you know super available. And it's not like I don't want to see them. I do.
I would say they're
Korean movies involving trains.
I would say you could skip both. I mean, Ort talks about Train to Busan like it's the best movie ever made. I mean, it's a Korean infection zombie movie. You know, it is what it is. I mean, I don't think it's bad. I think it's well done, but it's you know, there's much better.
I just haven't been in the mood. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I wanted to say like, hey, if you're gonna watch a Korean movie, let me recommend something that's better than that because there's so much great stuff out there. Like watch Yellow Sea or something, you know. But he also did Mother, a film that we've done on this channel before.
Yeah, Mother. Yeah, for a second I couldn't remember what that was, but yeah, Mother's good. Mother's good too. It's another movie that kind of subverts expectations.
I've been meaning to watch Shoplifters. It's like on my Hulu now, and I just haven't.
I got super annoyed because that was a movie I had to make a choice about when it was at the film festival back in September. And I was like, oh damn, I can't watch it because I gotta go see this. And I was
Right.
like, I really want to see it. And then like I found out like just a few weeks ago that it was briefly back in my theater somehow,
Oh
and
wow.
I missed it. I was like, oh what? I don't even really know what it's about. I just have been really interested in it.
I think it's about a family of shoplifters.
Yeah, there you go.
But obviously, it goes more in depth than that.
Yeah,
I need to
but
watch
yeah,
that.
it's like won some awards and had a lot of buzz. It had a lot of buzz. A lot of people saying good things about it. I was like,
What's
yeah,
the big Mexican film that people say is so great?
Roma.
And you didn't like it very much, right?
Yeah, I didn't dislike it. I just kind of didn't care. But there's a lot of things like that were good about it. Like it's good filmmaking for sure and pretty good storytelling. I just, as I said, I think the main thing that makes people like the most is how they are able to connect emotionally to the characters.
Right.
And I couldn't do that. It's not like I didn't care. Like it's not like they were bad, uninteresting, or unlikable characters. They're fine. For whatever reason, it didn't click with me. I would say watch it.
Yeah, I was reading some stuff on that film. Like it was really popular. I may have won best foreign picture or something.
Yeah.
But
Isn't that the film that got like Steven Spielberg all mad?
oh, is
Steven
it?
Spielberg's like, no, Netflix movies shouldn't win
Yes,
awards.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was it. But yeah, that was my whole point. Was it was on Netflix and seen by probably many more people than would have seen it if it was just at some little tiny art
Exactly.
house. So hell, I don't see the bad thing about that. I mean, what's his complaint? Is it the presentation? I mean, because
Well, what I don't know what his complaint is, but I know what he's saying about it. And what he's saying is basically, that the true movie experience is still the theater, blah blah blah.
but it played in theaters though.
Plus, there have been movies that like did get like awards that played on very limited amount of screens, and he didn't have any problem with that.
I mean, would you rather people not be able to watch the film, or people be able to see this film that otherwise they may not have watched?
Yeah. But as I've said before, this is the guy that got his start doing a made-for-TV movie, and yet for some reason he has a problem with like now a way for a director to break in isn't made for TV, but it's to do a Netflix movie, and he has some problem with that. Like, give me a break, man. Like, yeah, if he came out now, his Duel would have probably been on Netflix.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
I mean, yeah.
Now,
I mean,
is he gonna? So I guess he would say, well, still, like, Duel is a made-for-TV movie, so it shouldn't have gotten any awards. I'm like, yeah, you can afford to say that because you're Steven Spielberg and you were super
right.
successful since then. And you can say, yeah, I don't care that Duel didn't get this or that. You might have cared. I don't know. To me, I think it's really silly. I mean, I like Steven Spielberg a lot. I've praised him a lot up and down because I think not only is he a good director, but he seems like a generally good person because, like a lot of people, as we said, he's worked for so long with so many people that if he was like secretly a dick, it would have gotten out. There's no way
Sure.
he could have like somehow gotten nobody to ever talk about like him actually being like a jerk or mistreating people or something like that. Like I'm pretty sure he's a genuinely good guy. So
Well, he worked
it's disappointing.
he worked with people multiple times, so
Mm-hmm.
you would think if someone had something bad to say about him, they would have said it.
Yeah, just so many people over so many years and stuff, and people have mostly just ranted and raved and said how great they and how much they enjoy working with him.
Yeah.
So I tend to take that at face value, and it makes me feel good because I'm like I like a lot of his movies, and he seems like a good guy.
Yeah.
I'm glad about that. So it's a bit disappointing that he has this.
Well, I mean, times have changed. It's a different environment now. I mean, I don't really necessarily like the way it is either, but it is the way it is.
I mean, yeah, both of us, we like the theater, and we stand up for the theater and say, it's too bad if the theater's dying because we still like to go.
I mean,
those people that go, I never want to go to the theater, screw that, I can just watch Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
I understand their point, but I say, you're still missing something by not seeing stuff like at the theater. So I'm kind of on his side, so it kind of bothers me that he's going that far because I don't see what harm it does that if a movie is legitimately good enough for that, that the platform shouldn't matter.
I mean, he's shooting on digital now, so I mean, film is all but gone. So why does it matter? I mean, the presentation can look just as good on my television at home than it can in the theater. It's a digital projection.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
I don't know.
I mean,
I really feel like he's just covering up for something else. I think it just bothers him that something that he considers just small time, is getting awards.
Exactly. I think that's exactly what it is.
And that's too bad, because I would have thought like somebody like him will be above that. He's so successful, he's so admired.
Mm-hmm.
People love him and love his work, and rightly so. Like, why should he let something like this bother him? To me, that's ridiculous that it bothers him. Like, he should be above that. Be like, okay, I'm happy for new filmmakers finding new ways to show their films and be successful. So that's disappointing.
I like Netflix because it gives filmmakers opportunities that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise with some big studio. And in the old studio system, like we get films that wouldn't have gotten made, they give creative control, like studios don't do it all anymore.
Yeah.
So I respect the hell out of that, because what makes some of the best stuff,
Yeah, absolutely.
Creative control is everything.
That's a good way to spin back to Welles, because that was what most of his career was defined by, him having creative control, or in situations where he might have lost it, where he would walk away or change his mind, which is why he left Hollywood when he did. But, it's funny. In so many circles to this day, we've got Citizen Kane across the board in most circles, accepted as maybe, if not the best film ever made, certainly one of the best films ever made. You can talk to anybody, they'll be like, yeah, that's among the best films ever made. I'm like, well, that's funny, because he had complete creative control. He wrote it. He got to direct and play the starring role. And, he made every decision for that movie. The studio let him do it. And look what he produced. And yet, still, most studios are just like, well, I guess they just think that's an absolute fluke. The best thing that can be done is when you have a talented writer or director or actor, is limit their control as much as we can and put all sorts of, obstacles in their way and tell them all sorts of conditions have to be met. I don't know why to this day that is what survives or persists as the understood way to like make films. You always have like big studios are like, we're really nervous about giving you this much control, so we don't want to lose money. I'm like, guess what? This guy doesn't want to lose money either. He's not doing this to fuck around. This is his life too, or his or her. What do you know what I mean? The filmmaker. They seem to think if you give them creative control, they'll just go mad with power. Yes, that has happened every once in a while, and we did a good episode on it when we talked about Michael Cimino doing Heaven's Gate, which really kind of slammed the door shut on the new Hollywood era, because it was kind of a reintroduction of some of that creative control. And yes, it did kind of go nuts. But still, so many good results. And yet to this day, it's just like, nope. It's limited control, and if you step out of line in any way, we'll replace you like that, and all this stuff. You can have this project that you've been carrying around for years when you were a nobody, trying to pitch to everybody. Now you finally have this job, and they'll just take it away from you. Like, that must suck so much. I mean, that's been the experience of so many like writers and directors. Where they came up with something, it was theirs, and then through like the horrible process of trying to get it made, they actually lose it, and then they get to see somebody else make it, and probably in like a shitty way.
Jodorowsky or who's the Australian guy that the Alan Dr. Moreau.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's why sometimes when they still have to like attach their name to it. Sometimes they'll like tell them to take my name off it. It's like, it's got nothing to do with me anymore. Just take my name off it, man.
But how many times you could say maybe that wasn't successful or didn't quite work, but at least it was different. Like I can respect when people try to go a different direction with things and try different things. Maybe it won't work. Why are you going to be penalized for it?
And that comes back around to the original point where we talked about Orson Welles. He peaked early. He did this amazing thing, and then it was all downhill. Well, guess what? It was all kind of executive meddling after that.
Right.
Nobody gave him the chance to do it again. It's like, you want him to do another Citizen Kane? Well, let him do it the way he did Citizen Kane, and they wouldn't.
Yeah,
right on the heels, the Magnificent Amberson had executive meddling. So did What We Did. Touch of Evil had a bunch of stuff pulled out of it, and again, the way it was released, it was set up to fail. It was set on a double bill with some B movie, like it was like, you know, and of course it didn't make a profit. So you can understand his disillusionment
Yeah,
there, and
totally.
for the rest of his career, he kind of had to either play by other people's rules or not at all. And so again, if people want to say, "Oh, Orson Welles, he had all this stuff that he attempted and he didn't finish it," but he was more about not finishing stuff. I believe with all my heart he wanted to finish everything. It was just all these obstacles in his way because of the existing system of like studios and stuff like that. So it's funny to think, to me, that's ironic that when people point out, it's like, oh, you know, he could never recapture the magic of Citizen Kane. I'm thinking maybe it's because nobody gave him the chance. They're like, you're just a one-hit wonder. Now do things our way. So you can certainly understand him walking away from Hollywood and going to Europe and trying different approaches to making movies, and how problematic that was, and how a lot of them couldn't get made or couldn't get the money together. You know,
Right.
he's this guy as a 25-year-old that knocks it out of the park, and yet people still wouldn't believe in him. So you can certainly understand the level of disillusionment and frustration that somebody like him would have felt throughout his life. And he actually had a pretty good sense of humor about it. You know, there's one point where he said, "People often denied that I'm a genius, but no one ever called me one," which I think is pretty funny. But anyway, I'll try to wrap up on this one, The Third Man. So again, unlike the other movies we'll be doing this is not one that he wrote or directed or produced. This is simply an acting performance, but I've always just thought it's such a significant performance that it should be mentioned. It's certainly, to me, the best acting he ever did, although Citizen Kane is considered very good acting too. We'll re-examine that when we do the movie, hopefully next week. Our next installment should be Citizen Kane. But for this movie, it's often mentioned as among the best British films ever made. I think so. Yeah, it's right up there. It's maybe my favorite non-Hitchcock British film, maybe. I know it didn't hit you in quite the same way. But I don't know, maybe it didn't hit me that way the first time I saw it either.
Yeah.
I don't know. But then again, people have different preferences, and I'm not saying, oh, you know, you just need to see it again and you'll, you know, recognize it for the masterpiece it is. Maybe you just didn't like it quite as much, which I can understand. But as I said, I really find it really efficiently made. I feel like everything just is so, nothing's wasted. Everything just fits so well. I feel like the story is just so well constructed, and I feel like even when they're doing, you know, little bits that don't necessarily move the story forward, they're things that just tie into the atmosphere. I think this film has a really great atmosphere, being shot in actual bombed out post-war Vienna. It also gives people like us a good sense of just the devastation of World War II. This is, you know, this is several years after World War II, but you still have big areas of the city that are just rubble because of the massive conflict that was World War II. And it really heightens kind of the romanticism of the area and all that kind of that post-war Cold War intrigue. Again, you have these narrow cobblestone streets with the shadows and the light and the cool European architecture. It's just a great backdrop for the kind of story that's being told. And then it's a climax in the sewers, which is so cool. And some of my favorite cinematography are those long shots of the lone figure in the sewers, or at the end when Harry Lime is trying to escape. He's already been shot. He's climbing up, and his fingers reach through the grate, but he can't reach the grate. And then he has that moment. And I didn't talk about it, but yeah, he has that moment of resignation that's kind of interesting too, because at this point he's already shot and killed a man. So basically, the cops have said, "Okay, shoot to kill. Don't take chances with this guy." And that's what he says. That's what he calls out to our main character, Holly. He says, "Don't take chances. You know, shoot when you see him." And he's seen him, and he can, but he realizes, you know, he's helpless. I don't have to shoot him. We can take him in alive. And then he exchanges that. He has that exchange with Harry, where Harry looks at him and just sort of nods to him. He's just like, "Okay, you got me. You know, take me out." And he complies. And you understand why he did it too, because of probably the feeling of anger and betrayal. I believed in you. You were my friend, and it was all a lie. All that stuff. All that great emotion just gets passed in this very short exchange. And then you don't even see it on screen, as if you said. There's a gunshot, and then he walks out. I just think that's all so effective and so powerful. So I really like that. So even if there's other parts in the movie that you could argue maybe lull a bit when he's talking to some of the other characters, I feel like it all pays off beautifully. Once So yeah, even if you're not as happy with, say, the first 2/3 of the movie, once Wells himself comes into the picture as Lime, I feel like it all runs so well and is so entertaining and so engaging. So I really love it from that standpoint. I'll always think of Lime as just such a great effective character for all the reasons we already said, especially the subtlety, because man, it's not all in your face about look how bad this guy is. He's murdering women and children left and right, and he's laughing and maniacal. No, most of it is just him like calmly talking about like the choices he's made in life and the way he feels about it, and it just works so well. And you kind of don't see that anymore. To have a villain that way, usually if you have a villain, you have to be really overt. You have to be really obvious about how villainous he is and all the terrible things he does.
Oh yeah, twisting your mustache and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, for lots of movies, that's fine. That is what you want. You need to see the bad guy doing it, but not for everything. And for something like this, I really appreciate how the subtlety of this story that's being told. So yeah, I'm glad to see that the movie is as good as I remembered it to be, because it's been like over 10 years since I saw it, but I still really like it a lot, and I really do think it's a really iconic performance by Wells. It's kind of the way it's kind of like when you have people that have actually did live for a while and you got to see them change, and there's sort of different ways of seeing them. Like there's young Elvis and there's old Elvis. There's black Michael Jackson and there's weird white later Michael Jackson and stuff like that. And with Orson Welles, it's always going to be kind of like the actor Orson Welles and then the old fat bearded director Orson Welles that was kind of laughing at the world. So this is Orson Welles, when he's still young and kind of the actor, the performer Orson Welles before he makes that transformation. Although again, he still performed when he got older and larger, but still it's kind of like the same thing with that we said with they both took the same approach, I think. Who is it? He's more of an actor. Oh shit! You know who I mean? Brando.
Clint Eastwood.
Okay, Marlon Brando, right? Because Marlon Brando, in fact, he was kind of a leading man type guy, really good looking and stuff, and then he just got really fat and weird.
Fat and weird, yeah.
Yeah, but I always think it's not as bad with Orson Welles, because I think Orson Welles really embraced it, and Orson Welles always had kind of a sense of humor about it. Like I don't think Orson Welles was ever depressed about it. Like, he had all these things to be depressed about, and I don't think he ever let it get him down. That's kind of the sense I got when I watched his documentary and stuff. Like, he always seemed to have a really positive attitude, even though it's like, well, Orson, back in the U.S., most people, you think you're a one-hit wonder that did a movie 30 years ago, and now you're some fat guy in Europe that can't get anything finished, But he's just like, ha, life is a banquet. This is fun. He seemed to really enjoy everything that he did. He seemed to really into it and passionate. And that's probably another reason why I really wanted to do a series on him, because I admire him in a lot of ways, but mostly he's just really interesting. But yeah, anyway, as usual, I've done a crazy left turn and a digression. But my original point was, yes, to me, this movie kind of crystallizes kind of like that first half of his career, the younger Orson Welles, the young dynamic Orson Welles, as the sinister Harry Lime. So a lot of reasons why I think it's a cool movie.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this is one that I need to maybe sit down and watch again to maybe get the full appreciation for it. It's kind of been in a hurry the past couple of days, so I was trying to get it watched so we could get this show out.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I need to sit down and give it a proper watch.
Yeah, it's happened to me sometimes too, where I feel like I've almost had to rush into watching the movie.
Yeah, I hated to lose another week, so I wanted to make sure I got this in tonight.
Yeah, we don't want to spread our series out too much. So hopefully, even if we can't do it Tuesday, sometime next week we'll be able to do our next episode. And yeah, we will tackle the granddaddy of movies. Definitely the most high-profile movie we've ever done as far as critical acclaim goes. I mean, again, Citizen Kane, even for people that don't know the movie, as we talked about before, people say, like, this is the Citizen Kane of this, or, it's used as a word for excellence. So, euphemism or whatever for excellence. So,
it's the Citizen Kane of movies.
We will be doing the Citizen Kane of movies. Orson Welles movie, Citizen Kane, Rosebud, and all that other stuff. That is what we're going to jump into next week. So, I think that'll be really interesting.
Sounds good to me.
So good stuff. So until then, thanks so much for being with us, guys. I know we're a bit later tonight, but we got it we got it done. And yeah, so Orson Welles continues with part 3, Citizen Kane. So until then, thanks so much for being with us. Thanks a lot, guys. And we'll see you again soon. The movie discussion Pocket Dimension. That is Jay. I'm Cole. We thank you very much. Peace out. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks.